For what?
Not to do something.
Thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our city council meeting this evening on sorry, I'm just getting 12th, 2022. We will get started tonight with a Pledge of Allegiance by Andrew Lawrence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll move on to item 4.2, City Council comments and recognitions. Anything from council tonight?
I just want to say a huge shout out and thanks to city staff for the amazing event on Monday night. I know that a lot of hands went into that, and the turnout was amazing, and the public showed up. It was probably one of the funnest Halloween Harriman howls we've had in a long, long time.
Ever. It's
Ever.
the best ever. Forever.
Yes, it was great. Any other recognitions? Okay, if not, I've got one tonight. This is for a staff member. Sometimes our staff is recognized at their individual fields, if you will, their expertise. And one of our own was recognized recently at, what are my notes here? At a PIO, was it a PIO association? So tonight, we are going to recognize our PIO, John LaFollette. Just read here, he received this certificate here from the state, from this association. It says, the State of Utah Public Information Officers Association recognizes John LaFollette as a team player in recognition of your service to the Harriman City Public Relations Team and for your leadership of the Utah Association of Government Communicators. And John, if you don't, John's one of those behind-the-scene guys that is always here. I think I saw him take his first vacation since I started last week. Had a great trip with his spouse. But John does a lot behind the scenes with our social media, with events, with still the staff our size. Our staff members do take a lot of crossover. They help with everything else. And John is absolutely one of those that gets in and helps wherever possible. So just tonight, we just want to congratulate John and tell him how much we appreciate his efforts for the city and all he does. And just want to recognize him this night. So. The picture? Who's going to take the picture, John, if you're the...
Tammy's like, wow, this camera's awesome.
Don't touch my camera.
John always does that. John could figure out how to take the picture himself for all of us, right? The timer. You set the timer, put it on. Watch all those pictures are gonna turn out blurry.
There's a finger in the front.
They're on the sideways, their thumbs in front.
John, do you want to check those pictures? And John, do you want to check those pictures and make sure Tammy didn't put her...
You can do anything in Photoshop.
Yeah, you're good at that. All righty, we'll move on to item 5, public comment. I will say tonight, we are Am I doing this right? We are doing, if you're here to speak to anything regarding the auto mall, we will have another opportunity to speak to that later on. So this right now is only anything not related to the auto mall. If you're here for the auto mall, we just recommend you hold those comments till later. And we'll talk to you about when to do that at that point. But anything else, let me just read this quick note if you're here for any other comment. Audience members may bring any item to the City Council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agendas and minutes, where there is a link to fill out an online public comment form. Your statement will be incorporated into the public record. So with that, I do have 2 comment forms there, both for the auto mall. So I will hold on to these, Chris and Andrew. Any other comments, I'll welcome at this point.
Heather Talena, Harriman resident at 13633 South Rose Canyon Road. I'm here to speak to you tonight about an item that was in your work meeting packet, item 2.2, discussion regarding driveway improvements at property that I just stated. So I just wanted to follow up on that in 2004, Harriman City had a road improvement project that really impacted my property in a particularly damaging way. And I had been working with the city since 2004 to try and make corrections to the work that was engineered and causing me harm. In 2017, the Ivory Homes development started at Juniper Estates across the street from me. The way that property was developed caused additional impact, really exacerbating the issues. So after a series of letters and meetings between myself, my attorney, and the Harriman City, we came to an agreement, and I received a letter in writing of that agreement 5 years ago. One of the 2 items in the agreement was followed up on fairly quickly and promptly and was remediated, which I appreciate. Thank you very much. They did a great job. The second item, which is a bigger issue, still remains open. This year, communication has really escalated with the assistance of Teddy, thank you, and Blake, your office, thank you so much. So I'm here to talk about the need for this to be taken seriously, that I'm going to definitely hold the city accountable for redressing those issues that were created by the city and holding to their agreement that was given to me 5 years ago. I am open for questions and comments and communication offline, and I have all sorts of documentation to support all that. So if you need more information on the matter, please reach out to me before reaching a decision. I hope that we get to that resolution quickly. Thank you.
Okay. Blake will talk to you. Yeah. Any other comments this evening? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 6.1, City Council Reports. Jared, do you have anything tonight?
Yep.
Teddy?
We had a couple committee meetings. We also had a Utah League of City and Town conference over last weekend where a few of us and staff went to meet and mingle and get educated by some outside parties and learn how to do our jobs better for you, the public, which was very productive. We had the Veterans Committee. We met. We talked about our Veterans Day celebration coming up in November. We'll have a flag ceremony like we do every year out on the front steps. It should be a pretty awesome celebration. We also talked about our table set up at their committee meetings and our other events in the city. We had a OHV meeting where we did some trail surveys and some rides to look at some areas, and that was pretty much my committees.
Okay, Sherry?
I had the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District Board meeting today before I came here. Just a couple things. Last year, the legislature passed HB 121, which is in relation to tearing out turf grass and things of that nature to try and conserve water. We are actively working with them to try and figure out how to implement them. Sometimes legislation gets passed and there's not a clear path on how to implement it. Imagine that. So we're trying to make our Utah Water Savers website work with some of their programs so that people understand how they can get the biggest bang for their buck, the most access to the taxpayer money that's part of these pools. We have pretty good saturation in our soil right now. We're coming to the end of the water year. We're about 30% soil saturation. Obviously, it would be great to have more, but we're pretty good. We've actually had about 97% of average for water year, but the problem is we've have about a 12-inch deficit over the last several years, year by year, so we still are in a pretty big drought. Part of the committees we do are conservation, and I actually proposed this to the district tonight, and I would actually propose this to our staff. We do a lot of media outreach with conservation messages. Flip your strip, check for leaks, those types of things. We do a lot of messaging, asking people to conserve and cut back. But I don't see much messaging showing our story. Have we been cutting back? What does it look like? What are some of our successes? I assume that, I'm looking at you, Justin. Obviously, we have had some water reductions. We implemented the conservation standards. How were those received? What are some successes in our building community that are implementing those? I'd really like to see if Harriman can kind of lead out on that a little bit too, and maybe create a story that shows something more positive to provide back to the public. I'm not suggesting that the conservation messages needs to go away, but sometimes just getting a message back saying, hey, here's what's happening. Good job, people. This is what we're doing. I think that those would be really important. And so I don't want to give you extra work, but
Sherry, if I could interrupt, that's in the process. I am aware. I've been told that is in the process. They're working on a
Nice,
presentation
nice.
for that right now.
Nice. So I love that, because then we can lead out with the district, just kind of giving those messages back that start showing people you are doing it. And then maybe more people will be happy to jump on that and do those types of things.
Sure, can I ask for a question about that? There was a discussion I was a part of yesterday talking about secondary water. And I'm curious if there's any data around water usage differences between areas with secondary water versus culinary water only, and if that difference in price equates to less water usage. I don't know if there's a data point there. I'd be curious to see that, because we have areas of the city where we have secondary water lines that we don't have enough water to fill those lines and use those. I'm just wondering if using secondary water is actually encouraging more water use.
Well, the problem is, and that's another initiative from the state right now, is metering, because there's a lot of secondary water use that isn't metered. So people are like, oh, I'm using secondary water, so it's fine if I water all this stuff, right? But you're still using water. It costs less because it's not being treated and things like that, but it's still water use. And so that's why there's such a hard push on getting metering on that. And then when you see metering and when people actually start seeing what they're utilizing, yes, some of that usage changes because they understand the massive amounts that they're using. But it's just whether or not they're metered and whether or not there's prices that are affected by, even if you're metered, but you can use all that you want, then it doesn't discourage behavior as much as it says, okay, as long as you're on this tier, on your secondary, here's your price. But if you bump up to the next tier, here's your price. Those type of tier pricings typically tend to discourage overuse also.
Okay. Just curious, it was just in the context of what you're saying, I'd like to understand maybe if there's any research, and maybe it's not in our city, but in areas where that metering is, I'd be curious to see the impacts of that.
Yeah, and Riverton might be a good tool for that, because they obviously, pretty much all of their city is on secondary, and I think that they're part of the grants that are going to make sure everyone is on metering, and so maybe they'd be, good information for us back. But yeah, there is some data like that.
Cool.
Anyway, that's pretty much my report. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Sherry.
Everybody's squeaking.
Somebody's squeaking. Steve?
Just a quick commentary, if you'll allow me a second here.
Said quick.
We had a Association of Municipal Councils meeting yesterday. Holy cow, that was a long time. Yesterday here at City Hall, and it was nice to hear input from representatives from municipal councils around the county. The presentation was around HB 462, around the moderate housing legislation. And essentially, it's basically creating an accountability tool that whatever plan cities are implementing, they're going to be held accountable to see if they're actually implementing their plans. My commentary on that is, and this is personal in nature, so forgive me. Legislation that sounds good and feels good and intends good, but doesn't do good is stupid legislation. And we have way too much of that in all of our government. The fact that there aren't specified goals associated with this kind of legislation that puts all this burden, time, effort, money, and resources out of cities to accomplish a goal sheet without any specific goals is asinine. We asked specifically the director of the Department of Workforce Services, Housing and Community Development division there, the director, deputy director, and community and development planner. What are the specific outcomes they're hoping to get from this legislation? They couldn't identify it. How are they going to track whether or not they're making any of these things? Well, we're working on a database that might help get there someday eventually. It didn't stop them from passing the laws. It didn't stop them from holding cities hostage with transportation and other types of funding for failure to comply with something they have no idea if it even works. We need to be vocal and continue to observe and be giving feedback to our legislators to stop making bad legislation. If they're gonna intend to do something about affordable housing and access to housing, then do something about it. Don't just give it lip service. Don't just pretend like you're trying to do something to help. Because all you're end up doing in the long run is taking money, time, and resources away from something that could be used to solve the problem. So anyway, sorry, I'm off my soapbox, thank you.
Great, hear, hear.
Thank you.
I second that motion. The only problem is if they don't do that, what are they gonna do?
Yeah.
Right? They don't have jobs.
Get
They
it.
don't have jobs. Yeah, I'll speak quickly to two, I guess, committees I've been involved with recently. TRCC, the track fund. We met for the final go-round for this go-round of funding. There was $10 million available throughout the county. Harriman was awarded pending approval from the county council. Harriman was awarded $670,000 to be able to now complete the White Hollow Trailhead. So again, has to go through the final approval, but indications from the county there were that Mayor Wilson and the county council were very supportive of the direction. So thank you to Wendy to put that together. So we had the million, if you remember, we had the $1 million last year. Costs escalated. Wendy took that to the track fund. And because we had the matching money in place, it was an easy, they didn't even bat an eye at. So we were granted $670,000 to now be able to complete White Hollow Trailhead. So that funding, I understand we can probably get going because it's a reimbursable type thing. So again, we're coming into season, but excited to see that now move forward. The other, I was invited to attend at the state capitol the Hispanic Heritage Month. They honored 40, between Congressman Stewart and Owens, they honored 40 residents of the state for their contributions in this community. 5 of them were from Harriman. One of them is tonight. Antonio, would you just, I know this isn't, but this is Antonio Valbuena. Antonio was one of the recipients that evening. Antonio is from Venezuela and is absolutely involved here and an advocate for our community, and involved with our police department and doing just amazing things in our community. And the others that were also recognized were doing amazing things in our community. So we just wanted to shout out to you, Antonio, so thank you. We will now move on to item 8.1. We're privileged tonight to have our chief from Unified Fire Authority here tonight, Chief Burchett. We'll now have a presentation from him at this time. So appreciate you being here, Chief.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff. I wouldn't call it a presentation, more of an introduction. So I'll just take a few minutes of your time to introduce myself as the Fire Chief for Unified Fire Authority. So in April, I was appointed, which made me the 14th Fire Chief in our 100-year history. A little bit about me personally, I started in 1997 as a wildland firefighter with a couple of high school roommates and never looked back. We fell in love with the fire service and got hired together in 2001. And since 2001, I've spent time as a paramedic, a captain, a division chief, and most recently as an assistant chief. I am married with 5 kids, and my wife is a veterinarian, so she keeps bringing animals home. So we have more pets than we can handle. But as a family, we spend as much time outdoors as we can when there's time for that. When I was appointed in April, I laid out a 100-day plan. So my first 100 days in my office, I wanted to get out and meet all of our staff. So about 700 employees. That was well over 100 meetings, and it took me more than 100 days. So I didn't meet my initial 100-day plan. But really that intention was to get out and hear the perspectives of the people that I would be serving for. And the last part of that plan was to get out and meet all of the councils. So we serve 15 municipalities plus unincorporated Salt Lake County. And so this is kind of the last part of my 100-day plan. Most of what I thought was going to be an issue, since I grew up in Unified Fire, most of what I thought was going to be an issue is what is my issue that I need to focus on. And I have 3 main focus areas, and one of them is the health and well-being of our employees. The second one is the complexities and the relevancy of the communities that we serve. And the third is focusing on continuous improvement. So just a little more detail on those. The health and well-being of our people, that has often been an afterthought for fire service, and I would even say police is in that same area. But my intention is to focus proactively on health and well-being so that we can make sure that we're providing the best service with the healthiest people. The second thing is the relevancy of the communities that we serve. Like I said, there's 15 municipalities, and each one of them is slightly different, and we have to make sure that we're providing the service to the communities that you expect and for the best value that we can do that for. And part of that is Chief Whittison here as your liaison. He has a direct line of communication with me and hopefully is giving you everything you need. And the last area is continuous improvement. Since I replaced Dan Peterson, his job was to come in and fix our organization. 5-6 years ago, we were not in as good of a place, and today I feel like we're in a great place. And there isn't anything that needs to be majorly overhauled, but that allows me the opportunity to make small and incremental improvements that will push us into the future. So that's all I have. I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.
I don't, but welcome.
from
That's
council?
awesome.
Glad to have you.
Okay, well, thank you all for your
And
time.
I would say prior to this last week, we met, Councilman Henderson and I met with Chief and his team, just to kind of go over what they call standards of cover. So he went over that with us as far as what their goals for the city and their coverage time and kind of long
Bring it
range.
back to present to us.
Oh, that is coming back at another point too? Okay. But we really appreciate all you do and even your help here. So,
Yeah.
We shouldn't even say welcome, because you
No,
were here a
Anthony.
little bit too.
Yep. And Anthony is great. We appreciate you
Your face.
having Anthony with. But thank you for all you do in the partnership that you are
Appreciate
to our
your time.
community.
Thank
So,
you.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Okay, we will move on to item 9. And forgive me, so this is also this is a different public hearing. And Jackie, keep correcting me if I'm wrong. So tonight we will have a public hearing on the PID, which is the Public Infrastructure District. That's this item we're going to touch on now. If your comments again are about the uses or anything else in the auto mall, that's going to be after this. So that is not, unless it's germane to this, the taxing structure we're looking at right now, shouldn't say taxing structure, but the funding mechanism, that's a better way to put it for this, then the comment. So this, after this, we'll have a public hearing on this item only, so.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have our presentation up, and I got the clicker. Great. So we're going to talk about the Public Infrastructure District for the Auto Mall. I'll call it a PID, because that's the easier way to say it. And the location of this project is shown on the map on the screen. This is for the Auto Mall area. And it actually incorporates a larger circle than this. It includes work on the Crescent, on the North and Miller, on the garden parcels, and the Auto Mall property. So some of the key elements of the PID that we just want to kind of cover just for the public generally. This provides a mechanism for the landowner or the developer to access funds to construct the infrastructure. Historically, we typically have done that through impact fees or some type of CDA or something like that, commercial development area. But the PID allows the developer to put a tax on the property they own or what's highlighted. So in this map, the orange highlighted parcels are the parcels they're proposing to collect this tax that allows them to go out and access bonds or issue bonds, and then they can get the funds to build the infrastructure needed for their project. It takes the city kind of out of the process, except for everything has to be built to city standard, and everything has to be reviewed and approved by the city. And it's accepted, and it has to be public infrastructure, so it has to be given to the city once it's built. The grayed out parcels to the north of the orange on the right-hand side of the screen, those are parcels that are currently owned by the city or other property owners. And these are proposed in the governing document to be annexed into the PID boundary once they're acquired, but once they're acquired by the developer. So we can talk about the infrastructure improvements for this project. The improvements shown on this screen are improvements that are mostly constructed right now. This is part of the Midas Crossing development near where Garage Grill and the car wash and where Quench It and the other businesses are opening. The next portion of infrastructure would be the roads as part of the Auto Mall. You can see Auto Road Drive running north and south or up and down on the screen. Miller Crossing, crossing from east to west. And then there's some other improvements with utilities like water lines, storm drain lines, detention basins, and things like that. And the earthwork that's included with it. If you've seen, there's a lot of earthwork taking place out there right now. The garden parcel has a road planned on it for infrastructure improvements. And these are all infrastructure improvements that are included in the cost estimate that's in your packet, and we'll get to that cost estimate in a second. And there's the cost estimate. This shows that the estimated cost for the improvements that they've shown is right around $14.3 million. And then in our last council meeting, we discussed a schedule to go with these infrastructure improvements in the phasing plan. And so here's the phases. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are the Midas Crossing improvements. Auto Mall is what it is in Garden and Crescent. And so all the improvements that are shown were given dates here. And so I think some of the concerns were the Auto Mall roadwork being completed first. And as we work through this shows that they will be completed first. The last part of it is what we talked about, how they're going to generate the revenue to issue bonds. And so this shows that they're going to do a 10 mil or $0.01 dollars per dollar of taxable value of taxable property within the district. So as a clarification to the public, this tax only applies to people or to the district properties. So they were the orange properties that have been shown, which would be properties that are owned by the developer. No one else in the city would be responsible for paying this higher tax rate. And then the term shows that the bonds can be issued, I think, for up to 31 years, but the taxing can occur for up to 40 years to generate the revenue to pay the bonds back. So with that, I'll leave this map up. This one's on for public hearing. We also have Aaron here from Gilmore and Bell, who's our bond counsel. If you have any questions, Todd, our city attorney, has worked on this, and and Kyle's here to discuss anything that he's worked on with it as well. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those, or if you want to do the public hearing, we can do it after.
Okay, any questions right now for Blake? Okay, we'll do the public hearing and then come back. Okay, so this time we will open, again, this is the public hearing on this item only, just this infrastructure district. So if there's any comments, the same 2-minute applies to this process right now. So any comments at this point, we'll open it now at this point. Okay, seeing none, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Steve,
Second.
second by Jared. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion?
Just one quick point of reference on that map. I'm assuming the other property owner in that area is not participating in the PID,
Game point.
the game point.
The game point, it's part of the future, so if it were acquired,
Okay.
the property's listed in the governing document that it
Description.
could be added if it's acquired by the owner,
Okay,
so,
And only if then, so they're not required to participate.
okay.
yep.
I'm actually.
I think they've asked for what we asked for. I think they've addressed our concerns. Okay. I'll look for a motion then.
This whole thing?
Erica.
All right, I'll do it. Motion to approve resolution number R28-2022, providing for the creation of the Auto Mall and Retail Public Infrastructure District as an independent body, corporate and politic, delegating to certain officers of the city the authority to execute and approve the final terms and provisions of the governing document, the interlocal agreement, the notice of boundary action, and any other documents related thereto, approving of an annexation area, authorizing the district to provide services relating to the financing and construction of a public infrastructure within the annexation area, appointing a board of trustees of the district, authorizing other documents in connection therewith and related matters.
Motion by Steve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Teddy. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Okay, move on to item 10, our consent agenda. Any questions or comments, or I'll look for a motion on the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Motion by Sherry, second by Steve. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries as well. Okay, move on to item 11.1, consideration of a proposed master development agreement for Teton Commercial at 11840 South, 11918 South. That can't be right. Oh, and Mustang Trailway. That is correct. In the C2 commercial zone. Mr. Malloy.
This is an item that was presented to the city council in a previous work session. This has also been reviewed by the planning commission following a public hearing in which it received a favorable recommendation for approval to the city council. So Teton Commercial is located here at the corner of 118th South and Pioneer Street, west of the Harriman High School. We're all familiar with the Teton residential development project that is currently underway. This is an aerial perspective of the property in question. You can see the north arrow to the right of this map. And the Advantage Arts Academy, which is a charter school that was built a few years ago, is to the west of this site. So a couple of the key elements of the proposal: 18.3 acres. This is a development group that is currently active within the city doing what we call the Anthem Commercial Project. That project is also under an MDA process. And this development partner is essentially looking for a similar kind of agreement with the city as they move forward with the Teton Commercial Project. one of the key things that they're asking for in this MDA is the ability to have these coordinated signs that would allow for multi-tenants within the center, but it is slightly taller than what we typically allow within this C2 zone. And really the only area that is going over height is this branding, this identification that you're seeing at the top, this kind of this crescent-shaped piece. That's the element that is taking that sign, proposed sign over height. So some of the items that the city is achieving in this agreement, as we've discussed, there was a previous understanding or agreement with the property owner to repay for costs of improving an asphalt trail along 118th South that extended from east from the charter school. That was, I believe it was intended originally perhaps as an interim solution, but since then, the Planning Commission and working with some of our other development partners have been requiring, for example, Bullfrog, there was a wider trail connection in front of their site on 118th South, and we're hoping to kind of continue that kind of wider multi-use trail along 118th. So this actually is consistent with some of those previous decisions that we've been making. So the idea is to keep that trail that's currently in place, and then by allowing that trail to remain, there was an obligation to repay the property owner for some of those costs of improvements. And so that would be forgiven. So that would be waived under this agreement. The developer is maintaining 60% brick and stone on all buildings, except for, and you can see lower in this list, there is for 35,000 square foot building, they may have CMU as a primary building material on that. Typically, we would allow that kind of exception for a 40,000 square foot building, and then that would also come to the city council for an exception. So in this agreement, they're reducing that amount to 35,000, and it would just be something that'd be an administrative review in the process. There's an option for a reduced setback from public streets from 20 feet to 10. Again, that's not a requirement, that's an option. If they exercise that option, there would be some additional architectural requirements and some connection requirements. We're also identifying within the agreement some additional sidewalks. There's a portion of the sidewalk system that would be built by the developer, by the master developer, and then a secondary system that would be built by each individual pad owner or developer as they come through the project. And the last one was that we had requested that there would be an agreement that no schools or churches would be allowed within this center, primarily because we've been identifying this corner as an opportunity to provide services and also to generate revenue for the city through property tax and point of sale tax. Another issue that was kind of discussed back and forth with the developer and also with the Planning Commission was making some changes to our parking standards. The commission really wanted to see that their adjustments to our parking standards were going to be sufficient and that they were in line with the marketplace. That was one of the key issues for the developer, the property owner, is saying, you know, there's a few of our standards that they believed were not really in line with the market. And so we actually went and compared some of these uses with other projects in other cities and just really identified, well, how are they functioning? What is their parking requirement? And generally what we're finding is that the developer's request is consistent with what we're seeing in the marketplace and is sufficient. We've also asked the developer to provide a parking impact study or statement, which we have reviewed, our engineering department has reviewed, and we're comfortable with the numbers that they had recommended. And again, this was reviewed and recommended for approval by the Planning Commission as well. Again, we're maintaining that existing 60% brick or stone requirement, and as this slide is illustrating, we are reducing that opportunity to allow CMU as a primary building material for if the building is 35,000 square feet or larger. They included a number of material and color boards. Again, this is typical of what they provided in the Anthem commercial project, as well as some site furnishings. Where this project is obviously adjacent to the high school and some rapidly developing residential communities, we're hoping that we'll also make it not only accessible to for motorists and vehicles, but also for pedestrians. And so we're really hoping that we can achieve a number of kind of pedestrian scaled amenities and make it more comfortable for residents and kids to even, go to different businesses. Here's that image that we've looked at once before as far as identifying where those sidewalk systems would likely be developed. The red would be provided by the developer. The blue would be by the secondary, the sub-developer essentially, or the pad development as it comes in. And again, we're looking at these setback requirements and berms around the project as well. These were the 5 statements or kind of additional things that the Planning Commission was requesting that the developer consider or the City Council consider. There was we wanted to identify a parking maximum of 110% of the standard. The developer has agreed to that, and that is in the agreement. Also, when we do have that reduced setback along the public streets, we wanted to make sure that that was only landscaping. We don't end up having a drive aisle in those buffer areas. That's been included. Now, we've also, as I mentioned, this slide was from a previous presentation, but we have resolved this issue on the having an engineer review on their parking reduction. And then also, we've discussed with the City Council previously what your position was on the median on 118th South. And so the MDA draft is consistent with your previous direction. The only thing that we didn't really resolve was the issue of fencing on the west property line. That's adjacent to the charter school. There's currently a fence in place. Our incompatible land uses deals with zones, and where that charter school is in the C2 zone. We do not have a tool right now that would require that fence to be upgraded to masonry. This is something that I believe that we had talked about previously, and at this point in time, that I think is the one issue that we hadn't really resolved in the agreement, but it seemed like the council was comfortable keeping the existing fence, which was wrought iron. So again, you have the option to approve the agreement, the proposed agreement. You can, as I said, we've already largely addressed the Planning Commission's recommendations, which and then you've specified that no church or schools be included in the development, which is included. Or, of course, you have the opportunity to deny the proposal. John Gust with the development team is here tonight. I asked him previously if he would like to speak. He indicated only if you had a question for him. So this is not on for public hearing or comment. Again, we satisfied that public hearing requirement with the Planning Commission. Any questions for myself or for the applicant?
No, and only because we have went through it.
You've been through it once before, yeah. And you did provide us direction. We've made a few adjustments based on what you stated earlier, so.
The only thing, the applicants, parking is going to be fun over there with high school kids. They all drive 2 cars to high school nowadays, so it's a mess.
You're gonna have to monitor your parking lot, John.
It's never full. So I'm recommending we do the approval with the conditions, no church and school. I'll look for a motion along that line then.
What's all included
Okay.
in it as presented, right, Michael?
Correct.
So like you said, the planning commission conditions, the no church or school, it's already in what's presented to us.
Just include it in your motion, just to clarify, but I believe it's in there. Yeah, I think that's already been addressed, but.
Sure. Find the right one. So a motion to approve ordinance number 2022-39, approving master development agreement for the Teton Commercial Development with the Planning Commission recommendations and no school churches provisions as Michael Malloy noted.
Motion by Jared,
Second.
Second by Sherry. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Okay, at this point, we will move on to, we're going to kind of do this a little bit different tonight, just kind of for ease of the residents being able to follow this. We're going to present one big presentation on all of these different areas that we're considering tonight. There's five agreements, 5 things we're looking at, 4 MDAs and the Automall text
The
change.
text amendment, right?
Right, so there's 5 things we're looking at. We're going to do this presentation right now, and then we'll hold a public hearing related to all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
So then you can address any of your concerns at that time, and then as we check them off.
Yeah.
You know, so we'll have one public hearing after we presented all of this. So kind of the process will be, we'll present on it, staff presents on it. Are we asking the applicant to present as well? Is that the process we talked about?
I don't know if they have a presentation, but they
Okay.
do want to speak on the item. And in fact, I'm actually going to have a very brief, introduction on just what are the requests that are being before you tonight.
Okay.
And then really turn the time over to the applicant to speak to their application, and perhaps, explain some of their objectives and purposes as far as why they're seeking this agreement with the city.
Okay.
And the text amendment. As we mentioned in the pre-meeting, we'll just do this introduction first, turn time over to the applicant to speak, and then, as you said, you were going to
Then we'll do
invite
a public
anybody from the
hearing,
public to be able to
And
comment.
then
Right.
rebuttal, I guess if you would call it, a
Right.
chance to address concerns by the developer again, discussion among us, and then we'll move down the list and vote accordingly or make whatever motions accordingly. We good? Everybody, we good? Okay.
So really, just for reference, during our public comment period, we have this map that is identifying the 4 different areas. Each area has a proposed master development agreement. The AMSD is currently zoned for an auto mall zone. It's intended for dealerships to be located on this site. Within the AMSD zone, we have also received a request from this development partnership or development and property owner to amend our current text for the AMSD zone. Primarily what we're doing with this text amendment is clarifying or introducing the ability to have used vehicle sales. The original intent of this AMSD zone was to do new dealerships. We always understood that along with the new dealership, there would be kind of an accessory or an ancillary element of used cars. And in fact, there is an element in the AMSD zone talking about a transition use, where we would allow up front the potential of having kind of an early car lot as the site fully develops into a new car dealership. But it wasn't clear. In fact, it prohibited or did not really specifically allow the used car lot or dealer, right? It was new car only. So this request is saying we want to add used car dealers as a permitted use in the AMSD zone. And then in addition to that, we also, or the property owners asking for new and used recreational vehicles, boats, trailers, ATVs, motorcycles, all these different kind of related vehicle sales and service as permitted uses within the AMSD. There's a few other text changes in the AMSD amendment, primarily dealing with architecture. Again, there was always this understanding that when a new car dealership came to the city, they would very likely have standards that are required by that auto manufacturer, right? A Ford dealer has a particular standard that they are going to require for a new car dealership, or whatever brand it is that is wanting to come and sell vehicles here at the car. So this text amendment is really deferring even more to what is required by that national dealer brand. So there's a number of adjustments that are being proposed dealing with the architecture and the site planning. Another issue that came forward was there was some concern that our landscaping, our buffering, our street tree requirement would block visibility of the auto dealers. And so there are some modifications of our landscaping standards to ensure visibility. Another element of the text amendment is dealing with signs. There's a proposal to have taller signs oriented towards Mountain View. Again, trying to ensure that there's visibility for the future auto dealers within this area. So those are the primary adjustments that are being made within that text amendment. The north of Miller Crossing property is zoned auto mall. This particular application in the MDA is requesting the opportunity to allow some uses that we typically would see in an M1 zone, that we would introduce those into this area as a conditional use. Actually, the developer was requesting them to be a permitted use, and it was the city council's discussion that perhaps we would allow those as a conditional use with an administrative review process. That review process, if that is the direction from the council in your action tonight or in the forthcoming night, the staff has suggested that administrative review process would still be, have some type of a notice. And also any administrative decision would be appealable. Now, so the AMSD, again, there's a text amendment, there's a proposed MDA agreement with that as well. Primarily, the MDA is to ensure that that zoning doesn't change, right? It's a vested development right. And that's really the key element of the MDA for the auto mall itself. And again, the MDA for North of Miller is to introduce some additional land uses that we typically don't allow in the auto mall. Garden Plots is currently zone C2. There's a proposed MDA for that property as well. Again, what's happening under the MDA is the ability to introduce auto mall uses potentially onto the garden plot property that we would not typically allow within a C2 zone. And again, this is something we've been talking about, is that may be a conditional use with an administrative review process and noticing and subject to appeal, which is currently in city code. And then the same thing with the Crescent property. That's a C2 zone. We reviewed in the work session a number of permitted and conditional uses that are allowed on that property currently. And then the developer is saying in that MDA, they again would like the opportunity to introduce some auto mall related uses onto the Crescent property. And there's this discussion of, is that a permitted use? Is it conditional? Again, the developer is asking for it to be permitted. We've been discussing about making it conditional but administrative. And I'd like to go back and correct. I apologize. I believe the north of Miller Crossing process, the council in the work session, you were not suggesting that would be require a notice for the conditional use process. Okay, it's still, any administrative decision is subject to appeal. But I believe that you were specifying that you would like to see the noticing to be done for the garden plots and the Crescent property. So I apologize if I have misstated your intentions from our work meeting. So those are the 5 items that are related to the auto mall, 1 text amendment for the auto mall zone itself, and then the 4 individual MDAs for each of these 4 areas. As you've noticed in your packet, our city attorney, Todd Sheeran, for the text amendment itself, he created a 3-column review for the council. One is the original text. This middle column is what essentially the development request or the applicant has requested for the text amendment. And then the 3rd column, I believe, is the city's response. essentially our red line and our proposal. If you were to make a decision, I think it's our request that third column would be the text that we would potentially adopt. Another point of clarification, if the council does adopt the text amendment for the auto mall itself, we would like you to specify that we want to introduce those 4 auto, new and used, and ATV, boat dealers, trailers, all those 4 land uses into Chapter 1016 of City Code, which is the land use table. Previously, because we only had one land use essentially in the auto mall, which was new dealers, that land use does not appear in our 1016, our land use table. But now that we're talking potentially about 4 different land uses, we just thought for administrative purposes, it might be nice to go ahead and move that into our traditional land use table, which has all the land uses for all the zones in the city. So it just helps our code to be more consistent with how we administrate it. And all 4 of those would be, again, at the applicant's request, would be permitted uses in the auto mall zone.
Michael, before we allow, I'd like to just make a couple of comments, just FY, just a way of information for residents. And council, please correct me if so current zoning is already in place for the auto mall.
Yep.
We're looking to do used, and I would mention that we're looking at used as an option because I think when that originally was formed, we were not aware of the state statute that does. We were? Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyways, but just for residents, there cannot be a similar dealership within 10 miles of, so you can't have a Ford dealership within 10 miles of another Ford dealership. So we're within that 10-mile of proximity to South Jordan, for example, to there. So that really hurt our ability, in my opinion, to have a fully functioning new car dealership there. So we're trying to still take advantage of the auto mall. We did incentivize when we did some incentivize. We're probably the last incentive before the state just removed incentives from this sort of process. We were the last one to be able to come in with incentives. We have highly incentivized new dealers because that's still what we want. We've highly incentivized new dealers. So that's just so everybody knows that's still the hope, is that we just did want to, we're hoping that some used will get the door open. And then once they prove successful, there are some new cars already new dealers being discussed. A lot of them are going to want the concept proven. So that's kind of where we're at.
And where we've all seen a function of the marketplace, the price of a used car has significantly increased. We did the new car dealer primarily because that is the highest point of sale tax that we thought we could collect, right? But used car prices are higher. And then, of course, over the last several years, we've seen just recreational vehicles have just been exploding.
Right.
As far as sales and desirability and people getting into the outdoors. And so when we have an opportunity to potentially have a boat dealer or an ATV dealer, that seems attractive, at least for consideration by the city council to introduce that land use.
I think in addition to the purpose for the new dealership, we didn't want a bunch of little tiny used car dealerships cluttering our city. So putting the design standards and things like that in this zoning are very important because visually it needs to be appealing, right?
Right.
And so that was things that we were trying to prevent from happening.
Yeah, I mean, just one of the proposed used car dealerships, that's like a $10 million building that he's talking about. I mean, it is exquisite building like no used car dealership you've ever imagined. So it's going to be pretty impressive.
This will not be a State Street auto with
nothing
trailers,
like
and
that.
that's not what this project will be. This will be different than anything we've seen in the state.
And as the council has discussed this previously, you'd provided some direction to staff to identify certain metrics that would ensure that even a used car dealer would be of some size and substance. Mm-hmm. That there are some development standards there that we're not going to see just a series of small independent, used car lots on this
I think we share the
property.
same concern that a lot of residents have heard.
Yeah,
that
we have
We don't
some
want this to be,
minimum frontage, minimum acreage, and then some standards for achievement as far as progressing through the development agreement, yeah.
okay. We okay to turn it to, who's going to run point for the developers? Bruce, online, going to run point tonight?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Bruce, for joining us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Members of the council, members of the audience, my name is Bruce Beard. I'm counsel for the development team. I'm going to try and be a little brief during this section, and I'm going to do a somewhat of a similar introduction as Mike did, but hopefully not any longer than Mike did. And then we'll have to talk about how to deal with Todd's spreadsheet on some of these issues and some of the other issues in the MDAs that we want to talk about, whether we do that after the public comment period or some of it's just going to be sort of horse trading, frankly. And at some point we'll need to talk about whose horses are which. Larry and I will be tag teaming, Larry Myler and I will be tag teaming this a little bit. Mostly Larry gets to play the good guy. And when there's something that the city wants and has listed on these sheets that Larry's willing to go to, Larry's going to get to have the pleasure of saying, we agree and we're okay with that. If it gets to a point about arguing about something, I'm going to be the one who's going to be trying to do some of the arguing. But of course, Larry and James, as the actual developer, will have the final say and can overrule me on anything. So we're going to do it a little bit that way, if that's okay. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the documents or the concept because we've been doing this for about 9 or 10 months, at least since I've been involved, with numerous public meetings and public hearings in front of this body and in front of the Planning Commission and work meetings as well. Drafts have been circulating pretty much 90% the same for the last several months. So I'm sure that the council has done their due diligence and read them. So I'm not going to go over all of the nits and the nitpicky stuff in there. I do want to thank the staff and the working groups for working hard on this over the last several months. We've made a lot of progress. Larry has we've gotten everything in business. We've got dealerships under letters of intent. We've got other dealerships that have purchased property and that are ready to go. And this is literally the only thing that is left to get done is this text changes and the 4 MDAs. So I'm going to talk about just a little bit of the details. But before I do that, let me suggest one thing. Assuming that you're inclined to vote these up as a package and we can agree on the terms, I would like to suggest that whatever motion you make to approve these allows, as others have in your city, a cleanup of some of the final details subject to the approval of the mayor, the city manager, and the city attorney so that the spirit is right, but we just don't want to have to come back and have another public hearing, public meeting. We want to be able to clean up the details, the non-substantive details in a kind of a normal drafting manner rather than having to come back and do it. So that would be my suggestion. So again, I think there's only 4 or 5 issues that were raised of substance in Todd's comparison. And Mayor, I don't know how you and the council want to handle that, whether you want to handle it as, I say after the public hearing, or whether you want me to go through that list of them now, or you want me to do it in rebuttal. I'll do it however you and the council want, Mr. Mayor. I think it'd be more productive if we did it after the public comments, because the public comments are going to be more 30,000 foot view kind of things, I believe, than the details.
I'll look to council. What's your thoughts? My only concern, Bruce, I was involved in a process years ago where there was something presented to the public commented, and then after the public comment, that very much changed based on discussions. I prefer, honestly, to have the discussions, maybe the horse trading done now, to where the public can comment on where we are at. Any other feelings from council on that?
I agree.
I just think the public, Bruce, I just think the public needs to hear where we're at. So I think we do
I'm fine.
the. So-
I just wanted to bring it up and make sure that we had discussed the process so that I wasn't going to accidentally forget to go over something that we needed to go over. So with that being said, then let me address a few of the things that came up from Mike's statement. And then I'm going to ask Mike to bring up Todd's spreadsheet so that we can talk about those, but not quite right now. I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 of the overarching issues that are important and that Mike had touched on, and then we'll go to the spreadsheet. So let me talk about a few of them. The first is an easy one. I'm going to take a low-hanging fruit here, and we agree that the use table needs to be fixed and corrected so that it accurately reflects the various uses that are now going to be hopefully approved with the MDAs and the text change. So we think that's absolutely correct. In terms of history, I'm glad that Sherry and then everybody else mentioned it, because I was going to, of course, make the State Street reference and the design standards regarding the used cars as one of the driving forces for this, because I went back and listened to some of the discussions from the original AMSD, and it was clear that there was a decent amount of concern about the used car uses looking, what's the word I'm looking for? I think it's trashy in general. And that's why we started making sure that we could have these design standards that would apply to used car dealerships at the same time, as Mike said, recognizing that the new car dealerships are pretty strict in terms of what the design standards are. So that's why we bifurcated the design standard review. One is, as Mike mentioned, the new dealerships comply with their national standards. Used dealerships have to comply with the design standards that we've specified in the documents. And I think we've been pretty much in agreement with the design standards on this. We've discussed it more than once, and I think we've actually wound up doing it correctly. So that's the next one. One of the things that Mike discussed is the dichotomy between permitted and conditional uses in the AMSD. The problem with making them conditional is it is a long process. It can be a long process. It can be appealed. It can be taken to court. For example, if somebody's disgruntled about a use process, I've handled cases where people have objected to a conditional use, and it's literally taken 3 years to get through the judicial system on an appeal. And that's very, very problematic for someone who needs to move certainly faster than 3 years in this ever-changing second derivative speed economy. So we are pretty adamant. In fact, I shouldn't take the word pretty. We are adamant that these uses, the primary uses that are in the AMSD at least, be considered as permitted uses rather than conditional. And I mean that in the areas, all 4 areas where the AMSD would be cross-applied, and that's AMSD itself and the other 3 as well. In fact, it's probably even more important that they be permitted uses in the Crescent parcel than the other parcels, for the precise and paradoxical reason that there's simply more people who could be out there to who could object to the conditional uses. So we think it's very important that they be permitted. And I would point out in that regard that there are a number of uses that are currently allowed as a matter of right in the Crescent C2 district that are far more intrusive than the AMSD uses with the design and operational restrictions that we've put in the document. And we're taking out, as you know from the earlier discussion, some of the C2 uses that would have been permissible now, and we're taking them out voluntarily. So it's extraordinarily important that these uses be permitted uses, not conditional uses. Let me go back. Could you bring up then, Michael, those are my big ones. If you want to bring up the spreadsheet, that would be helpful. And I'm not going to be able to read it on my screen at that size. If you blow it up and just maybe take it to full screen, that would work. So if you're going to slide it over, yeah, that's. Hang on, I'm trying to make it work on my screen. This platform is a little less friendly than most other most other electronic meeting phrases are friendly. So let me go through these issues, and it's a little hard to track. I appreciate Todd working on this. It's a little hard to track, and as I understood it, these weren't. The third column is not necessarily a staff recommendation. That's what I understood. But what I understood was if the city council was inclined to deal with these issues, then this would be staff's recommendation, but that these weren't necessarily staff's recommendations to begin with. So let's talk about the simple ones here. And I'm not quite sure I understand how all of these track, but oops. Hang on. I actually had it the size that I could read it, and now that size just went away. No, worse. This is like an optometrist test. Better the first or better the second? If there's any way you can make that a little bigger, maybe take it full screen, that would be helpful. Okay, that's too much. Okay, so let's go over some of these definitions. Can we just take it back to where it was a minute ago, where I could read it? Sorry. It's gotten to the point where I just can't read it. You had it right just a minute ago.
Go back to the one.
150.
That work?
Probably got to slide.
Or just put it in at 140. Just type in a 140 number on the Zoom. Okay, there we go. That's I think legible to everybody. So we are actually, Larry, you want to take over and do some of the easy ones here when it comes to the vehicle storage, the enclosed vehicle storage, the covered vehicle storage.
Yep.
Because those are, I think this is one where Larry gets to say, okay, we're fine.
Let's make it quick. We're fine with this whole screen right here. How's that?
So we can go to.
Good grief.
I'm sorry.
He said take over sooner because that was a lot faster.
Well, yeah. So let's go to the next page.
So that was,
And we're good with that language, Todd?
Yeah, the language proposed so the way this table works is the first column is the original language, as
Right.
we pointed out. Second column is what the developer originally proposed. And the third column is we accept all of the developer's red lines, and then staff commented on them and made some suggestions based on prior discussions.
And their staff comments or staff's corrections are in that third column.
Yeah, so all the red lines come from staff in the third column.
Perfect.
And then comments are both, if it's HM, then that comes from the applicant. If it's TS, then that comes from staff.
And that one was AMSD,
This
is AMSD
This is just
text
AMSD
change.
text
just
amendment.
AMS, okay. Just trying to
Yeah, this
clarify
is the
for,
text amendment.
okay. So text amendment, we're good. Okay,
Well, no, on the first page, on 1031-2, which are the definitions, Mayor, we're okay with the definitions. And again, part of this is why I suggested that we allow, if you choose to do this, then you pass it with the allowance to clean it up and make sure that, that Todd and I have a chance to make sure that the language is, I'm not saying any substantively different, but there may be minor punctuation, spelling, those kind of things in this document that I'm
Yes.
sure Todd's not going to claim perfection for it.
I'm getting the head nod from council that yes, we're okay with that, from city attorney, that
Thank
we're
you.
okay doing that.
Perfect. So let's go to the second page.
Can I just have one qualifier on that? If there is something that materially changes a portion of it, we need to have it back.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely, Steve. We have no issue with that. We think that's the right way to do it. I think it's probably required, frankly.
Yes, it would be.
So generically, we're okay with these changes as well. Correct, Larry?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about conditional uses. We don't think that these could be, that they're, I guess it depends on how you're calling them accessory uses. And I'm not quite sure if I understand how Todd is doing it, because if you'll skip down a little bit, it seems to be killing a lot of these things that we put in as service uses. And I don't know how we're going to deal with them if you're going to kill them. We think that the way the language was written to begin with was appropriate. And I maybe Todd can explain this one, because I don't understand why you're killing them.
I don't think it's necessarily killing them, Bruce. I think it's just rewording them in a separate way. So the original draft that was proposed by the applicant, it just had a permitted use section, and then it had this service requirements language in the permitted use area. So what we did was we modified the conditional use, the original conditional use section, and just clarified that there are certain things that are going to be an accessory use to the AMSD permitted uses. We add two things in there: vehicle repair limited, which is similar to what you proposed, but it's already defined in city code, so we didn't see it as important to tinker with language that's already in the code. And then we clarify that the vehicle storage, which is defined above, is an accessory use to the AMSD zone.
Okay, then I'm okay with that. And you'll have to pardon me, it just started a thunderous rainstorm where I am. I'll try to keep it down as much as I can, and I'll turn my mic off periodically. I do apologize. Okay, so we should be good with those. Let's go to the next one.
Oh my gosh.
The next one is 1031-5. Yes, we're fine with that. That makes sense. The changes that the changes here are fine. I think they don't. I don't think they make any real difference. So let's go to the next one. It's hard to track this. And I can't see the comments on the screen outside to the right. Okay, perfect. That's fine. Hang on, I lost the screen completely.
I don't think we need to show that first column, which might help Bruce see the comments on the right. There we go.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you very much. The next one is just, I take it, these are just section numbers, so we don't have any issues with the section number correlations. That's fine. So 1031-7, again, that's just a section number correction, which we recognized earlier, and I thought we'd fixed it a couple times, that it just didn't get fixed. So go down to the next one, 1031, it's the new 9. And again, that's just a section number correction, so we're okay with that. You can keep going because that's, again, just a section number correction. And landscaping and other, this is the 60-foot issue. So the landscaping along the Mountain View corridor, Larry, to be honest, I don't remember that that you and I discussed this one. And I don't know whether you're good with it.
This is okay, but it wasn't the development team that was saying we wanted to change the placement of trees. It was, we were hearing from the retailers. We just want to make sure as we come back in with site planning that we're okay, that let's consider the fact that they want as little visual disturbance to their building and their inventory that's parked out front as possible.
I'm sorry, I was on D, not E, Larry. I'm sorry.
Landscaping improvements along the Mountain View corridor on the UDOT property.
Okay.
We did not specifically discuss this one, so
Just the one we're okay with.
It's 30 feet wide of UDOT property. They want us
yeah, this is, we can't control this.
Yeah, this is UDOT land, isn't it? I don't think we can control that.
So we don't have the legal ability to do this. So this addition, we have a significant problem with.
So the background on this one is that the city has a long-term cooperative agreement with UDOT to maintain the area behind the curb along Mountain View. The city goes out and mows that about 2 times a year. It's full of weeds. And so we wanted to put the requirement in there because we didn't want the dealerships calling the city and asking us to continually mow it and keep the maintenance down, or keep the maintenance up to keep the weeds down. So to solve that, we were proposing to put the landscaping requirement, pass it from the city to the developer, or to the dealership on this one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Who's going to own that land, like in front
That
of the
land will
garage?
always be UDOT's, but we are under contractual agreement to ensure that it's maintained. So
This is one of those, this is a policy question that as a lawyer, I can tell you it's kind of a mess, and I wouldn't put it in the lands. If you were going to do it, I wouldn't put it here. I'd probably put it in an MDA standard, but it's just a policy call from Larry as a business call as to whether he's willing to landscape property that he doesn't own. And I'm not sure what level of landscaping we're talking about. The last thing we want to do is have landscape that requires water, for example, in this particular area, because we're in a water shortage, as we all know, and we don't want to get into, and water's horribly expensive, and we shouldn't be wasting it on these kinds of improvements. So we have a generic problem with this. I don't know whether Larry's willing to agree to any modifications to this or not that we could agree on here, and then we can write later.
UDOT hasn't allowed us to put any water into those, so typically what they are is rock. They turn out to be rock and other things that don't grow, that don't require water.
Native vegetation.
Yeah, and some native vegetation.
Except the only problem is we all know that weeds grow through water. Weeds grow through rocks, as anybody who has a xeriscaped front yard is. So essentially, are you just saying that we've got to improve it, or are you saying that Larry needs to actually maintain it and improve it both?
The staff's idea on it was that to get an attractive project, a dealership would want to have a good-looking frontage on it, that it would need to be improved. And I don't think there were going to be any of the low water use landscape standards on that because it was in the UDOT property. So it's not something that's been vetted out all the way, but the council has the choice to go either way on it. We could continue to maintain it and mow it. I just don't know if the staff's going to go out there more than 2 or 3 times a year to do that. We have a lot of areas that we mow. So in the past, or in other developments along Mountain View, we've required these improvements and this maintenance in the subdivision process.
Well, this one is simply a Larry's call because it is a business judgment in its entirety.
And I agree with Bruce that if the council does want this language, that we put it in the MDA rather than the text amendment.
So the problem is it's 7/10 of a mile. I mean, am I going to go mow that 3 times a year for the rest of my life? Do you think, Blake, we could put the charge on the sections of the auto dealers that are there and just
How it should be
say
done.
your weed control all the way down to the highway?
Yeah, I think it would be each dealership would
So,
just.
because if we could work together to do that, I think it's less egregious for
I
one.
think that's the intent of what we're going for there,
That-
really, not to put it on
exactly.
you, to put it on,
Okay,
the
we can
user.
negotiate that with them if you'd like.
Right.
And that's a manageable strip for each one of them, but it wouldn't be manageable for us.
I think it's to their benefit, like he's saying, it's to their benefit to have a better product all the way to Mountain View
Yeah.
corridor.
Yeah, I don't think
so
you'd want to
could-
landscape that until that dealership developed, and then landscape it when they do their site. We're not asking to
That's-
landscape.
If we could say it's going to be minimal landscaping and doesn't require a lot of, any water, if UDOT won't let us
No
put water
water,
out
it's
there.
just rock. We're just asking for
So
rock,
can I
just
make
rock.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a suggestion that it sounds like we're all in relative agreement to move this to the AMSD MDA and put a provision in there that says that the non-water use, low improvement landscaping and its maintenance would be on a dealership by dealership basis. And we'd put that in the
Yes.
MDA.
Correct. And I think
Okay,
it
so
probably
we can-
might need, and Bruce, if I could say, it probably needs to also then potentially be in Miller Crossing, north of Miller
I think
Crossing.
you're right, Mayor. If there's an
If it's a
AMSD
frontage,
there,
if it's a frontage to Mountain View, if there is a auto use there, yes.
that makes logical sense, Mr. Mayor. Larry, you want to take over on E and just get to do your good guy work here?
Yeah, I think we're okay on E. Are you okay on E with the clustering? Yeah.
Okay, then let's go to
Okay, he's okay.
vehicle storage. Let's go to H, which is vehicle storage. We can live with Larry. You get to do your good one on 1, and then I'll talk about 2.
Heather, you're welcome to speak too. Heather, you're welcome to speak too, Heather.
All right, so we're okay with the operating hours?
Yes.
The vehicle storage with a concierge service is
Right. It's a little problematic. The concierge service is something that, for example, Germain Marine offers, but it's kind of an add-on. I mean, if someone's bringing back their boat after a trip, they ought to be able to get it into their storage unit without calling them to pull it in. So we just wanted to make sure that there's a separation between a voluntary additional payment that they can, or service that they can pay for. But this,
other than
go ahead.
other than that, we're okay with this paragraph.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to find language, Todd, to correct me. I mean, we're just trying to find it to where it doesn't become just storage for, I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, rather than a self-storage, we want it to be an accessory storage for clients of the
Right.
dealership as a concierge type of thing, rather than
Not necessarily
just
that they have to come.
But not every trip where you're picking up your boat or dropping it off would require concierge service.
And and so that's where I get that the language could be problematic, because that's not the intent.
And that's why we created the definition for vehicle storage and
Right.
really limited it to operating vehicles and boats and things like that. And anything that's not specifically listed in the vehicle storage definition cannot be included in that storage.
Yeah, and that's our position is the concierge service is sort of overkill with all of the rest of it in it, and it just doesn't work. I mean, people not everybody wants to pay for a Waldorf Astoria experience. Some people are happy to stay in a lesser place without concierge service for everything. Everything else is still the same, except I get to park my boat if I bought it from you and it's being repaired in that situation by myself, rather than paying somebody $20, assuming I know how to back up a boat or an RV, which a lot of people don't. And that's why some people are willing to pay for the concierge service, because they just don't like having to back up their own equipment. But this one is
Again, I think it's just language. I think we just need to work on, it sounds like we're on the same page.
I think you've got that listed, it's just striking point 2 off.
Yeah, I think it's just striking
That's it.
2.
That's all.
Yeah. Because you got the relationship with the primary use of the vehicle on that, so if I own a boat and I get it from that boat dealership, I can park my boat
Actually, I'm
there.
okay with that. Todd, do you think that meets the intent of what we're going for?
Yeah.
If we strike number
Right.
2?
Yeah,
Perfect. So let's go
number
to the-
2, oh, sorry, Bruce. Number 2 was,
Nope.
was included in there based on prior conversations. But I think because of the definition that we have for vehicle storage, that should absolve any concerns that the council has with just random people renting a unit and storing their
Right.
household items there.
Correct. Okay.
Okay, so we're good on that one. So let's go to the next page, because I think we're actually making pretty good progress on this. And I think there's only just a few other, yeah, we're okay with that. So interim facility, that's just a cross-reference fix, so we're okay with that. And Todd, I really want to thank you for doing all of this horrible cross-reference work. And I believe, Larry, we're okay with the 24 months for a temporary facility.
We're okay with that, but I think we need to back up one step.
To the top.
The top of that page, the height cap is 20 feet. The C2 height cap is 45 feet. I don't know what we're going to be at. I don't know what Germain's buildings are going to be at. I think it might need to be more than 20 feet. Because if you get a big RV or a big boat, I don't know. So I don't know that we can agree to limiting it to a 20-foot building. The C2 zone limit is 45.
If they're going to,
We don't need 45, but we need something bigger than 20.
And
Larry, if they're going to vote to pass it, then you need to tell them, you need to suggest a number other than 20 feet.
I would suggest 30 feet. That puts it to about 40 with the berm. So even if that stays, we're less than the 45, well, far less than the 45 on top of the berm, which is allowable right now. So
Okay, so now,
I'd say 30 feet rather than 20, and I hope I'm saying the right thing for Jermaine's sake. but-
yeah, and as somebody
work.
mentioned before, if we need to come back in, then if somebody's coming in with a great use, well, we'll come back in and we'll ask for something more than 30. But right now, we're going to suggest that we need 30. And I don't think, we're happy to discuss it further if you want to here, or we can wait until you're considering a motion, whichever you want to do, Mr. Mayor.
I think I'd like to wait and hear public input on
Okay.
that issue before we make a decision.
And to be fair to the applicant, this was staff's attempt to try to address some concerns that were brought up as far as storage being right up against a property line. So this is really the applicant's first discussion with staff and the council on this issue.
I think there might be some
Yeah,
concerns
and
with
that's-
40-foot tall buildings right behind your backyard,
So let's come, yeah, that's definitely what, okay.
My garden's not getting any sun anymore.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
that's
let's,
why I missed it, because it didn't have a Heather notation on it. So as we were going through it, I missed it. I apologize. So let's go down to the interim facilities, and we're okay with the interim facilities. And so now we're on the next page. I'm not sure. I don't think we have any problems with the signage saying it's okay unless it's specifically addressed, because we haven't specifically addressed everything here. I think Exhibit B is,
thumbs up from Larry, so we're
The
good.
other-
Yep.
yeah, the only question I have on number 2, on the signage there, on the second one is, are we making an exhibit to the ordinance, or are we referring there to the exhibit in the MDA?
So I believe the exhibit is also in the text amendment, Bruce, of
Okay.
the location of signs, as well
Okay,
as.
then that's
the-
fine.
Yeah.
No, that's fine then. Then we're okay on that. And then just go on. We're okay on everything so far on the screen that I can see. We're okay with everything there so far because I don't see any red lines from Todd.
We have not done this before.
Keep going down because I think we're just about done here. Yeah, light's fine. Non-public, yeah, that's fine. Those are fine. Those are nice. Those are the nice technical cleanups that we were talking about earlier. So, again, I don't see any changes here except some cross references. There's a Blake note. Should Blake, I'm not sure whether you want to add the language here, or is that's just a, we've always got a requirement that you have to comply with signage, I mean, with spacings. Are you wanting something other than just a spacing? And frankly, it would probably need to go in the AMSD rather than in the zone, AMSD MDA.
I don't think there needs to be anything said here. I think this would just be through engineering review process. We'd just make sure
Okay.
colors and everything wouldn't interfere with the traffic signal operation and visibility of it.
Okay. And I have not done on the one on the very bottom there. I don't know whether we've had a chance to have our sign people look at that addition to the finished grade. I don't think that makes an issue, but we probably need to have our sign people look at that. And if we can't live with it, then I think we probably need to bring it, at least this one issue, back to the council in the future if we can't live with it the way you've got.
It's okay.
Okay, let's.
It's okay. Correction is okay.
I'm sorry. I
Okay, they
couldn't
said
hear
the
you.
correction's okay, Bruce. They're good with the correction.
Okay, perfect. So we'll go to the next page. And again, I apologize. I thought we were going to do this a couple weeks ago, so I had this trip planned. And Blake, again, I don't know what you want on this one.
I don't know all the numbers off the top of my head, but I know when we're next to residential, we want to make sure the brightness doesn't exceed a certain level. And so we can cover this in engineering as well, I think, as we
Okay,
look at it.
we'll cover it in engineering.
Yeah.
Probably just make
Yeah,
sure it
you
meets
need a
our city
certain-
standards next to residential.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure
are-
the city already had standards for that.
Okay, we're just gonna say meet our
Follow our standards.
typical standards next to residential. Okay? Sorry, I'm just trying to push us along. I don't want to be here till midnight.
Yeah, no, you're good. And so am I, Mayor. We're both doing a really good job of that, I think. So I think we're done on this one. Let's go through it and make sure.
Any concerns, Heather, Larry? Okay, I think we're good, Bruce.
Okay, then there's really only, I believe, one substantive issue left regarding the various MDAs, and I believe that the only substantive issue left is the triggers on north of Miller Crossing to do a non-AMSD use. And if somebody could bring up the city's new proposed language on those triggers, we can go over them, because some of them we're going to be okay with, others we're not. And that I think is the last substantive issue that we need to deal with.
It's page 503.
Thank you, John. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. Some of these are okay. Trigger number one is not okay. We're just not willing to limit it to only 5 acres of non-AMSD use. It's, you know, if we've got the motor vehicle dealers that we're trying to bring in and the completion of the footings and the foundations, we'll go into that one in a minute. But right now, I don't think that that this should be, that number one is in there. We're doing everything we can to put AMSD uses in there, but we're just not willing to limit it to 5 acres. So let me talk about the second one.
Bruce?
And foundation. Yes, sir.
Bruce, Larry here. Could I take it over for a minute? Are you
Sure.
okay with that?
Absolutely. This is a policy call.
Yeah, the 5 acres is, well, number one, we don't have anyone at the table for any non-AMSD uses north of Miller. There's nothing there. We're not trying to set something up to jump on quickly. We just want some flexibility. And I'll tell you the main reason why is for Travis, we're getting his building done, architected right now, and we want to get that built as quickly as we can. That's his main building out on Mountain View Corridor. But we're also secondarily working on a building twice the size. That would be the Mitsubishi dealership, new car dealership, and the service center. One building combined for both of those across Auto Drive. So that would front onto Main Street. We're just trying to make sure the funding works. I mean, it's costing $8 million to build his first building. It's going to be over $12 million to build the second building. And if we hit the triggers that make sense, we can all agree on tonight, then we want to be able to perhaps monetize north of Miller in order to help us keep things going in the AMSD proper. So that's why we didn't want to be limited to 5 acres. 2 footing and foundation is fine. We're even willing to go with the third building being in building permit. We feel confident about that. We could agree to that. We also would agree to having the Auto Drive and Miller Crossing roads finished with the PID money, because we all want that, I think, to the infrastructure to be in first. And so we're willing to do that as well. 2 more things. One, the request was made by staff, or the change by staff, to purchase all of the land south of Miller and east of Maine. And the reason why that's on a contract time, year by year, is because we wanted it to correspond as much as possible with having dealerships there. We think we'll fill in the dealerships on Mountain View Corridor faster than on the main side. So we don't want to have to buy all that land ahead of having, of course, we'd love to have buyers in the auto mall for the Main Street side, but we may not by that point in time. So we didn't want to be held to that. The last thing is design standards. The suggestion by staff is that north of Miller Crossing, like office warehouse space, for example, if it comes in, would have the same design standards as the AMSD dealerships, but that doesn't make a lot of sense because it's pretty high standards for those dealership buildings. So, for example, 15% glass, pretty hard to do. But if we can go 5% glass on that one requirement, we think we can meet all of the other standards for an office warehouse space to match the building standards for dealerships. So that's kind of, as we go through the list of what the staff was wanting, that's what we'd like to do. Not be restricted to 5 acres. Go ahead with 2 footing and foundation inspections complete and a 3rd building permit in place. Not have to buy all the land east of Maine and south of Miller Crossing, and then just 5% instead of 15% on the glass standard.
And I need to add one more because I've been reading this, and we instead of saying the completion and final acceptance, which is going to run a issue about warranties, etc., that language should say that it's going to be the substantial completion and warranty and going under warranty for Miller Crossing, Auto Road Drive, and because if you make it final acceptance, I would read that to be after the end of the warranty period, and that adds a full year of delay while you've got a perfectly good road sitting there, and nobody can use it for building anything. And that just doesn't make any sense.
Mayor, I don't believe that was our intent when we suggested that.
Yeah, I think the intent is to match, as far as design standards you're talking?
Well, for the road.
For the road.
We just paved and usable.
Right.
There was a warranty period. I don't think we were anticipating that. So however that language would work, we could fix that.
And I'm perfectly happy with paved and usable because the fire code has a specific provision of when you can get a building permit. I usually, when I'm writing one of these kind of triggers, I usually say that it's acceptable to the fire department, but we could also live with paved and usable or substantial completion. And I think we know what we're talking about here. And I think it's just kind of as we talked about, this is just a wording issue. And I didn't want to fall victim to Steve's correct statement that if it's a substantive change, we need to bring it back. I think we all agree that it's paved and usable, not final warranty exception.
Well, and Bruce and Larry, and I think I'll speak for all of us when I say this. The trigger language, again, for me, it's concerning. I'll speak to myself on this one. For me, it's concerning when we're hearing constantly, we've got 3 dealers ready to go, and we're getting pushback on 3. That's why we did 2 triggers, because we contemplated at one point, okay, 2, you can have part of it, but then 3, and I do personally get frustrated. I am nervous that we're putting 3 out there based on conversations we've heard. Like, we're not asking anything extra other than what you're telling us. So I don't get the pushback. I'll be honest, I don't get the pushback on 3.
Well, and part of
There's no pushback, Mayor, on the 3. Larry said he was okay with that.
2 footing and foundation, 1 building permit was what the staff was recommending, and we just accepted it tonight.
So a large portion of our discussion 2 weeks ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, Council, is that, so one, for public digestion, this MDA and this trigger is not needed from our point of view. It's something that the developer's asking for, right? As assurance that they can make more money. That's not really under the city's purview, right? What our discussion was, and the main point was, we're willing to consider this if there are enough assurances that the rest of the auto mall is going to happen. So you're saying these 3 are coming in, then put in the agreement that these 3 are coming in, but we want it to be enough that we can see the rest of it's going to happen. And quite honestly, for me, just the statement that, you pretty much just made the statement, you don't intend to do those 3, you want to jump ahead to north of Miller. That's pretty concerning. Like what we want is assurances that the rest of the auto mall is going to happen.
I'm sorry, I want to make sure of what I understand what you just said. You think I just said that we don't want to do the 3, we want to jump ahead to north of Miller?
That's the concern without doing the buy down.
No, what we're saying is we can't do anything north of Miller until minimally we have the 3, 2 in footing and foundation, 1 in building.
But we're talking too, the purchase. That's why we're asking for all the land to be purchased. We don't want the purchase of the auto mall to be put on hold.
We don't want north of Miller to happen before the auto mall. It's part of the auto mall.
Right, well, in order to do anything north of Miller, we'd have to buy the land north of Miller, right? So that does
We want the auto mall property bought, and we need that assurance that that property is going to be developed as auto mall.
We feel like we're compromising by, kind of when we had that meeting across the hall, I'm trying to find a happy medium to say, I've got one side of council saying, we need an auto mall, we need functioning, we need cells. I've got another one, part of council on one side. So I'm trying to find a medium saying, buy all the land in the auto mall itself to prove that will be auto mall. And then at that point, we're giving you this flexibility. So we're not trying to limit you, but we just still want those assurances.
Well, we're not worried that the auto mall, that we will buy it. So I suppose there's, we could show good faith and say,
right.
If what you're asking is that we buy the auto mall.
Though, right? So I've heard several times if we don't agree to this or that, the deal is off. The deal is, the only deal is the city owns property and you have a contract to purchase that property for auto mall zoning.
Right.
That's the only deal that's on the table.
Right. Well, that deal has
All
a
of,
time.
all of these things you're asking for in addition to it, which take away our certainty, right? And to gives you flexibility, but then it introduces risk to us. So we're okay with the concept of you want to have some assurances to have some flexibility, but we need further assurances that the core project happens. And if there's not a sufficient assurance there, speaking for myself, then we don't even need to do this.
Could you enumerate the assurances that would work for the council then?
Well, I think it's listed, but right now what's typed out here, isn't this trigger language less than what you're asking for? You're saying 3, we're saying you only need 2 and purchase
You're
the land.
saying 2 footing and foundation
Right, isn't this here?
and 1 building permit.
I guess
I
just to
think.
clarify, this is not what I indicated at the last meeting was not footings and foundation. It
Me
was
neither.
Right.
completed buildings.
Right.
Functioning, operating, working, selling cars. It wasn't anything to do with footing and foundation.
Multiple triggers, phasing, limited.
But then the
Tax
discussion
revenue.
came up about what does that look like? Does it look like the temporary 2-year building? Or are you talking completed full construction buildings? Because an operating business could operate for 2 years out of the shack temporary building. Right? So
Well,
If I could articulate, here's my concern. The land north of Miller Crossing is aspirationally still part of the auto mall.
Correct.
We would love for those to be auto dealerships. That's been our intent all along. I suppose I could say that we recognize that it serves your purposes to monetize that in a different way in case an auto mall doesn't happen immediately, or it takes too long to develop dealerships out there, or there's not an appetite for dealerships. You want the opportunity to be able to develop that in a different way than an auto mall for purposes of generating cash flow for your continued operations and development. In order for us to go away from the original design of an auto mall over the entire property, we need to have functioning, working, we need to have an auto mall, at least in part, before we're willing to give away a part of the auto mall for something else. And I don't know how to articulate that any other way. It's not a matter of trying to jam anybody up or like, mess up any negotiations or anything. It's just, this is all supposed to be an auto mall. And I'm not willing to not have it be an auto mall for anything less than substantial completion of an auto mall. Is that, I don't know how to articulate that.
Yeah,
any
we've
other way.
already whittled it down from the bigger picture for these same arguments. Like, we need to have
Yeah,
assurance
we
that the
expanded the
core.
commercial so that there's
Right.
less auto mall. Now the land to the north is smaller, so it's even a smaller auto mall. And maybe the market forces are such that that's actually how it's gonna end up being. And
And that's kind of what we're
that's what it
acknowledging
what it
is that at the end, yeah, that might be true. And you're wanting to kind of skip that deliberative process to get to that point where we're saying, well, we need some realistic assurances that
Yeah,
not
I'd
just
prefer that
these,
the
not just
land
these
north
3, but
only be auto mall.
Yeah,
That-
but
that's what I'd prefer. I think that's what we'd all prefer.
yes.
I think we're saying that we are willing to allow something different than an auto mall in proportion to the success of the auto mall as it's unrolling.
Yeah.
Right?
agree with
So
that.
that, you get half of an auto mall, you get half the land for whatever these other uses are. I think that's why there's a 5-acre limit. That's why there's some other limits, is that there's
Mr.
no,
Mayor, may I?
if you can monetize all of it and build flex space and move on, there's no further incentive to continue the rest of our vision for the auto mall. That's what our concern is.
And
Mr.
that,
Mayor,
I
may
mean, in that
may I-
area,
may I
doesn't have the
interject
opportunity to build
something?
out that way.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think if I can perhaps summarize it, it seems to me that there's 3 primary disagreements here on the trigger. And number 1, if I may, is the 5 acres of non-AMSDUs. Number 2 is what counts as getting started, and the staff's draft was 2 at footings and foundation plus 1 building permit for a third. And the third issue is the early takedown of the other property. And those are, I think, 3 different issues that perhaps we can address. I mean, obviously they smear across each other, but I think that those are somewhat different in their regard. And if I can talk about the second one first, that is the 2+1. Larry has agreed to what staff is recommending on that one. I understand that Sherry and Jared want more than that, but we've agreed to what staff is recommending. The other 2, we simply have some fundamental disagreements on, and that is the 5-acre and the purchasing all of the property. And those are all simply business calls. I mean, if there's some compromise in there, I can suggest some, but this is Larry's key, one of his key. I think it's perhaps the key issue remaining in this whole negotiation.
Well, and I will speak to the 5 acres personally. The 5 acres, trigger 1 was put in there to kind of as a carrot, to kind of as to say, okay, 5 acres, we don't want to lose that whole thing. You've talked about needing to monetize it. 2 of them, then, that was my thought, then you have 5 acres. You get some decent flex space on a 5-acre piece of property. We'd like to preserve the rest of it. That was the point of, it wasn't to limit you forever. That's why trigger 1 and 2 are in there, to say, 1, you can have some flex space. We would like to still preserve the balance to try to get on them all. Or, again, I think we've said, if something C2 were to come to you tomorrow on the edge piece, I don't think you'd have anybody in this room that would say no to a C2 on that piece, right? Again, I don't think we want to necessarily put that in MDA, but I'm just saying I don't think you'll have anybody fight back on something tax generating in that area. It was just, we don't want a strip, to quote my friend in the audience over here, the whole thing flipped tomorrow with this whole strip of, oh my gosh, don't bring a fizz to just about. But the whole thing immediately to go to flex space, M1, light manufacturing, without guaranteeing. We're still, I mean, we need those guarantees. Hopefully, we're truly not trying to be difficult. We're just trying to say, Automall is our priority. We understand your case. How can we come together to say, Automall may not be the whole thing, but at what point are we comfortable as a council saying, you've gotten to that point? I promise we're not trying to be difficult and say, we're just trying to find a happy medium to say, how can we guarantee that we have an Automall with tax generating going before? We've been burned on this stuff before. Like you, unfortunately, we're speaking from past experiences where we've been burned before, where we have to protect our last. And I'll pontificate for a minute. I was in league meetings last week. I'm sitting there and watching all these fantastic projects going on around us in communities near us. We're talking, South Jordan's talking to an urban center right now with office space, and there's uses out here that we can. I think we get so focused on some of this stuff, we take our eye off the ball of there's other uses we can recruit to this area rather than automatically defaulting to a flex space just because it's easy and it's fast. I get that, but I think there's other options to monetize your project as well right now. We're trying to facilitate that in a way, but we need some assurances. I don't know if that makes sense. We're truly not trying to be difficult and bog down this project. We're partners in this. Let's be honest, we're partners in this.
And if I can just make 2 comments, I want to correct Bruce on one thing. You pointed out Jared and Sherry's objection to the footings and foundations versus completion or something like that. I definitely am in agreement with them on some concerns there. The second thing is, without any disrespect intended to the good efforts and intentions of staff, they're not the ones that have to vote on this. Ultimately, we're the ones who are going to make a say. So I appreciate that you're willing to agree to the staff's recommendations. That may not be with what we're okay with.
I understand, Steve.
Nathan,
and I just.
Sorry, Bruce. Nathan has been raising his hands.
I just want to be very clear. So the footings and foundations actually came after we had the work session and we met with the developer, this was their proposal. We're bringing it, if this is their proposal, if we accept it, staff recommended you should do things in addition. So you can change it, but this was not created by whole cloth by staff. We looked at theirs and said, let's do at least a second trigger. We did propose the 5 acres to try and say, all right, if that's really necessary, then you can only do this. The purchase agreement allows 3.61 acres at the next, June something, and then it's another 3.61 acres, and after that 7.22 acres, they have to take the balance down. So it's 13 acres up here. That's where we came up with 5. And I don't know what else they can't buy 13 unless they're going to trigger that whole thing. They got to buy it all. So that was some of it. I just want to, you certainly have the ability, and I appreciate Councilor Shields. We're giving you what we think might work based on all the conversation we heard, but there are 5 of you. You can work it out, and you're not going to hurt our feelings if you reject it. I just want to be clear, we're not trying to force you to do this.
Could I recommend at this point, I think you've heard our points, let's go to public comment. I'm recommending, staff, I'm looking, or council, let's go to public comment. You can listen, you can maybe as a team talk about, if there's no negotiation, then it is what it is. I think we've.
I'm going to take my seat and pull out my calculator on this particular point, but I'd love to hear public comment too.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can make a suggestion.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, thank you very much. We appreciate the professional and courteous dialogue on all these. And Steve, if I slighted you on one of those, I apologize. I do think that in summation, though, I think we've now gone over all of the issues regarding all of the 5 documents.
Okay.
So if I can make one recommendation, that we allow the public comment and then afterwards maybe take a brief recess.
Okay.
There's a lot of
Lot
stuff
to take
surf
in.
through for a couple hours. I think a good breather might be helpful.
Okay, so in order to not keep residents, let's go to public comment at this point then. Again, you can speak to any of these items. If you've got a form, that just helps us keep it on public record, but if you've got a form, hand it to Chief Carr here as you come up. I've got the 2 already, so we will, when open public comment, at this point, we will start with Chris Casey. Chris, if you'll just, even though I've got your name, just speak your name don't share your address. We've asked not to share. We don't want.
Chris Casey, homeowner in Harriman, business owner in Harriman, hopefully soon to be 2-time business owner. Talking specifically about the Crescent parcel that's directly across from the community I live in. And a little history about me, I was a realtor for 12 years. I was the president of an HOA. I was a chair member of a local HBA. And when I was selling homes in a car lot or car dealership, went in a community surrounded north, south, east, west by residential homes, that community saw drastic decreases in value, almost instantaneous when construction started. Homes went on the market for more days, people taking price decreases, investors going in, buying those homes. You see for rent signs go up. When you drive through a neighborhood of renters, there's no pride of ownership. Lawns aren't maintained. The homes deteriorate on the exterior, and it brings down the value of that entire area. The area across the street is Tuscany Estates. To have an auto dealership, an auto lot directly across from that, it's going to be detrimental to that community, not even talking about the homes that actually back up to that space. I understand along Mountain View, that makes sense. It has its place, but to pick up an auto dealership or an auto lot and skip over 2 communities and put it in another community just doesn't make sense. I would ask anyone, when was the last time you drove through a neighborhood directly across the street or directly behind an auto mall, and it was a nice neighborhood? It's a rhetorical question I can answer for you. You haven't. They are hard to find. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thank you for waiting this out tonight. Mr. Lawrence. Yeah.
Hi, I have some neighbors that couldn't make it tonight. Is it possible to have the 5 minutes on the clock?
You bet.
Awesome. So I live behind the Crescent piece. And personally, I wish this would have gone through the official rezone process to an auto mall, if that's what they want to do, is have an auto mall. Would have given us a lot more opportunities to make public comments and things like that. But from what I understand, the reason that they're doing the MDA is to give assurances back and forth so that they get some assurances and we get some assurances. I don't know if you can pull up page 532 is the MDA for the Crescent piece. But if not, that's fine. But basically, the assurances that we have in that MDA, all there is now is there's trees, and in a former MDA, a previous version of the MDA, it said that the trees had to be touching. Now it's at 30 feet. That would definitely be something we, as neighbors, would like, is the trees to be much more close than 30 feet from each other so that we have some coverage. The major thing that hasn't been discussed tonight is the berm. I won't go over the history of the berm, but there has been a lot of discussion of whether the soil needs to be removed. I know Blake brought up in a couple of meetings ago that there was some things indicating in the ROD that it needed to be completely removed. And I know there's some of you that believe that that is the final answer, that it will all be completely removed. I heard Larry mention when he was talking about the heights of the Germain boat storage that would be on top of the berm. So I definitely feel like it's still unclear whether it needs to be, how much needs to be removed. When we went through this process with the planning committee, they agreed with us that it did need to be in the MDA. And I don't see that anywhere in this version, any mention of the berm. So I definitely think that should be included in it. And also one of my neighbors mentioned that when Rocky Mountain Power was out doing some work and things, they that was the whole point, is they're supposed to be spraying down the water and things like that. So I don't know if that can be included in the MDA, but that is definitely a concern that it's removed safely. And we felt like it wasn't done safely when Rocky Mountain Power was working on it. Just basically that of, and definitely if it's not clear still, if Blake hasn't gotten final word of if it is for sure needs to be removed either by EPA or UDEC or Harriman or whoever, if it's not clear, I think you guys should wait to vote on that. I don't think you should vote on all of these together tonight. You should separate this out and either include it in the MDA that it needs to be removed or postpone the voting until that is completely clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other comments this evening?
My name is Dustin Thatcher, and I also live in the residence right across from Crescent. And I just want to back up everything that Chris said. I do think that values of the homes could be affected. And then also, I forgot what I was going to say, but you know, it seems like everything's kind of up in the air right now. There's nothing definitive about that area. I don't know what you should put in there exactly. I'm not against the dealerships. I do think that, along the Mountain View corridor is good, but I don't think it belongs in between residential areas. So, and if you think about it, I don't know if any of you guys would, like having a dealership right next to you in between homes, but anyways, that's all I have to say.
Appreciate it, Dustin. Thank you. Yeah, I will say we appreciate your residents. Having been through this process, having to sit through these, sitting here for hours waiting for other items to be, we appreciate your involvement. We do absolutely appreciate you following this process and being involved. So please stay involved and please keep talking to us. So that being said, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
It
No,
wasn't a
it's just
public
moving on.
hearing.
Okay, public comment. Okay. So at this point, I would look for a motion to take a 10-minute recess. We okay with that?
Yeah, so moved.
We'll come back and, okay. Motion by Steve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, give us 10 minutes. We'll be right back and we'll keep deliberating on this.
Talk through this with me, or? You have some concerns? I went out, took a break already. Okay, so.
Started anything?
That is the Braves, that was the Braves score too, so.
I'm waiting for that. But I know what you're saying. And it's the existence of the deadline. And I like that they're trying.
Okay, here we go. Welcome back, everybody. We will continue this item now, these items. Looking for a little direction from council, and I had a conversation with the developer. Developer right now is proposing either that and I speak to North of Miller, as it stands right now, without much other discussion, they would like staff's recommendations. If we're not okay with that, and I'm guessing that we're not, they would like to table that item. They would like to table that item. So I'm looking for guidance on the other 4. I'm guessing already that that's kind of where we want to go on that one then. Because I'm guessing we want to have more discussions about triggers and, am I reading the temperature right on that one?
On that one, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's some negotiation and discussion to be had there that I'm not sure we can get through, finish, complete, codify.
Come on up. Yeah, we're still in that.
Just on that point, we could see it's a sticking point, and frankly, if I was sitting in your seat, I think I would say, show me some more action. So why don't we go forward with the AMSD on North of Miller, just like it's always been, with these changes tonight, and let's just table this conversation. Let's see what action we can get. Let's see what movement we can get. Let's get construction going, and if in the future it looks like we're going to nail all of the south of Miller Crossing, but probably struggle north of Miller Crossing, but we got a lot more action than today, then maybe we have another discussion.
So Larry, you're suggesting not even necessary for 2 weeks. You're saying, let's see
Not
how
2
things
weeks.
go.
Let
see how things go.
us prove out, that we can do this, and then let's have another
And to
discussion.
me, that speaks volumes, because I think we're having a different conversation.
That's what I'm hearing from you, and I think I would agree if I were in your position.
And I think there's a different conversation if you come back and you've got 2 more dealers under, if Mitsubishi, we see a sign thing from somebody like a Mitsubishi. I think this is a very different conversation, even in 2 months, so this could be a very different conversation.
Whenever. I think we need to move the needle a little more. We believe we can,
Okay.
and that's what we've been here to do for years now.
And I will
let's
say,
get
as
it done.
we appreciate that, because I think that's what,
100%. Yes.
Well done.
that's.
Thank you. I think that's great.
Okay, so any changes to the other? I want to address, to speak to Andrew's point on the berm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking with, and counsel, legal, like Todd, you can instruct me, Nathan. And Andrew, I appreciate your research on this. I get it. I absolutely get it. And if I'm being honest, Larry won't like that I'm saying, I hope that what you're saying is the answer. I truly hope that it's going to be a better product if the berm is removed. I do have concerns that I'm not an expert in this. I would like to include in the MDA language that the EPA, not our consultant, that the EPA is consulted and we follow their guidance on the berm.
Blake had some comments about this earlier in the meeting.
That supersedes everything
That supersedes the record of decision. So I think we want to maintain our institutional controls. Otherwise, that's a slippery slope, letting that in.
Explain that to me.
So in 2001, the EPA conducted a study and identified the Kennecott South Zone, Operable Unit 3, which is the Butterfield Creek drainage, as they gave the institutional controls of that to Harriman City. And we fought hard to get those and to make sure that we could oversee all the cleanup. The study included all of the toxicology reports to show if the contaminants were leachable or leached out of the rock into the waters, which they found it didn't, and or had a really low solubility. And so by doing that, they gave Harriman the ability to manage and govern. They gave us a framework to work in. So we are working within the EPA's framework with that. And so, like you said, there's none of the staff here has the the technical expertise specifically for that item. So we went out and hired a consultant to review every study that's done and to advise us. Ultimately, it's the city's decision at the end on what, if the remediation action that's proposed is adequate and meets the record of decision. And so that's usually what we're asking our consultant to do. Does this meet the ROD? I did actually meet with the EPA and the state, I think it was last week, and they did not know the answer about removing the berm, if it needed to be removed or not. I'm trying to get a meeting set up right now, but Larry and his group did say that they were okay, Bruce has said this several times, to put in the MDA that they would follow all state, county, federal, and local laws required for the cleanup. And I think it would be wise to keep it underneath those institutional controls that we've been granted from the EPA.
I'm just saying there's some legal things that we can't, sounds like we can't go above and beyond outside that scope in the MDA. We've got to stick to that in the MDA based on that record of decision.
So as far as the framework is dictated by the EPA, right? So if we were to put into the MDA that we want you to remove all of it down to the base level, right? Because that's all stuff that was put there. It's all on top of the original, right? It's not originally there contaminated. It's stuff we allowed to be dumped there, right? As temporary storage. So if we put in there that we want you to remove all of it, they would have to remove all of it and follow the EPA standards. Like we can't do something that supersedes that, right? We could say you have to move it, but then they have to move it in the way that fits with safety standards.
Why don't we just require them to remove it? We're selling the property at a discounted value based on the fact that we knew they'd need to remove it. We approved it in the PID, enough money in there to remove it. I don't understand why we wouldn't just require them to remove it. Then it removes that concern of a huge building on top of a huge berm.
I'll say, and then there's that secondary issue. If we don't require it to be removed in full or in part or whatever, well, then we have to go back and look at the building locations and height on top of the berm.
Yeah.
There's no way I would want to approve a 40-foot building on top of a 15-foot berm.
Right.
That soil beneath it's also impacted, correct? Because it's part of the original area.
So the original property was, I believe it was a chicken egg farm. And so they cleaned that up. Tuscany Development actually owned that property. Or no, it was their property. And they moved the soil over there and created a repository. And that's where it gets a little fuzzy. We don't know if it was contemplated as being a permanent repository or temporary. I've heard both stories. The one that sounds most correct is that it was a permanent repository and it was Tuscany was going to build a park and they were going to own it and maintain it and watch over it. Then the city was given the property and it was going to be a public works yard or something else. I don't know what the whole idea was there. But then when Miller Crossing came in, they got approved to take the cap off of the repository, put more material on, and then put the cap back on the
I was going to say, because, there was stuff added just not too long ago.
Yeah, it was part of the Miller Crossing development, so.
If I can just add a comment, I have no frame of reference. All I know is whenever you do construction work or dirt or move anything, it costs $1 bajillion. You put 100 feet of grass and it's, $6 million, it seems like. I can't believe how much things cost. So I could be way off. But there's, in the cost estimates in the PID, there's $1.3 million allocated for earthwork here. Now, I don't know how far that stretches. I know a lot of it depends on how much of the soil has to be moved off-site versus whether it could be blended with other soils and replaced somewhere else, right? That some of these potential remedies, right? If it has to be trucked off and taken to one of those other sites, it's costs a fortune and their dump fees are expensive. I understand all that. I think I would love to not see structures on top of a berm right next to residential houses. And if there was a way to remove the berm or level it down or something like that, that's what I would prefer to do. I don't necessarily want to create this massive financial burden above and beyond that 1.3 million that's already planned to do that earthwork, if that makes sense. So I don't know how far that would stretch, but if that's possible inside of the budget that's being allocated, that's what I'd like to see done.
Mr. Mayor, may I respond to this? Because we didn't hear from the, I had some responses to some of these concerns by the neighbors, but I'm happy to, Larry and I can participate however you want on this issue. I think this is an important issue.
It's your call, Mayor.
Yeah, absolutely, please, yes.
Let me address a few things. First of all, as it sits now, under the C2 zoning, it could be 45 feet on top of the berm. Larry has offered to allow it to be limited to 30 feet from the grade. So that's already a 15-foot reduction from what is now allowable as a matter of right in this zone. And many of those C2 uses, as I mentioned earlier, are far more intrusive than the auto mall uses that we're proposing with the design and other restrictions that we're willingly agreeing to.
Yeah.
So it's much, much less. Regarding Steve's issue, I haven't looked at the details of how much of that quote earthwork close quote is resolves to move the berm, but my guess is that it's not very much of it, because that's earthwork for all of the other PID issues as well. I can tell you, having done a bunch of environmental.
Just to clarify, Bruce, there's 2.3 million for all of the earthwork. There's 1.3 million allocated for just the crescent piece.
Yes, you're right, but that's not all necessarily berm removal.
And again, I fully acknowledge that. I don't know what that covers in terms of earthwork. That's what I'm just saying, yeah.
And I was just about to agree with you that it could be, depending on how you have to truck it, whether you have to move it to Tooele, et cetera, it could be a significant amount of money. And that's why we're simply willing to say we're going to comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws and limit it to a 30-foot building on top of that. Most environmental experts, I believe, and I hope that your city's consultant will back me up, will tell you that picking it up, moving it, is perhaps the way more fraught possibility of terms of contamination, et cetera. It's the last thing you want to do if you don't have to do it, is pick it up and move it, not just for cost, but also for environmental reasons. So that's the number one issue regarding the berm height. And the second issue is just to address Mr. Lawrence's concerns. We are following all of the appropriate processes for doing this. We're not trying to do anything illegal, improper, immoral, and your staff has made sure that we've followed all the proper steps for doing this under the recently changed state code that specifies exactly how we're doing this. And one other difference is, I believe that Mr. Lawrence indicated that the Planning Commission agreed that the berm should have to go. That's not actually correct. In fact, the Planning Commission made a recommendation, made a I think it was 34-1 on the 5 motions for all these documents. And there was no motion from the Planning Commission that and this is my memory, and I suppose I could be wrong, but I don't think so, that the Planning Commission recommended that the berm be completely removed. I believe the Planning Commission agreed with the provision that we would comply with all applicable federal and state and local regulations.
Okay.
So,
Bruce, I'm going to turn to our staff for a minute to speak to that. Michael,
Yes,
can you
sir.
speak to the?
So this was a summary of the Planning Commission motion that was in draft minutes produced by the City Recorder's Office. So the motion from the Planning Commission included 2 recommendations that the city work with the developer to reduce as much as possible the embankment that is on the site now, and provide some height restrictions for the development to be more conducive to the privacy of adjacent residents. And that was specifically for the Crescent parcel, Crescent property.
Did they give
that's my
I know
memory.
in their discussion, they were talking about a certain height of a point of zero from back of curb or top of sidewalk or something as well, from listening to those meetings. I don't know if there's actually in their minutes.
Yeah, another thing, just for a point of reference, is that building height is measured from the established grade, and the established grade is done through the subdivision review process, which on this property has not gone through a subdivision review. There is some opportunity of looking at, I guess, looking at the natural grade and reviewing whether or not cuts and fills have been done legally. And so there's a lot of questions still as to, whether or not that fill is
So
a
the
grade that can be built
45
on.
feet above whatever
The
the ground
established
level is, what it
grade,
is, not
yeah.
necessarily the top of the berm.
Or,
Okay.
excuse me, finished grade, yeah, finished grade.
Blake,
And then
Blake, anything else on this that you want to?
The issue, what I'd like you to speak to is the issue of, because what I've heard from many residents is the assertion has been made by some that they can just build on top of it as is.
So I think we need a little more information to know that. For the contaminated soil, so there's two issues, contaminated soil, and so I've been meeting with the EPA. I'm trying to get a meeting set up with our consultant. Haven't been able to cross paths with him yet because our consultant's been working in LA and in Canada. But I'm hoping to have that meeting next Thursday. Right now, it's tentatively scheduled for that day. So once we get all of them to look at the record of decision and see if a repository is allowed, and by the way, the EPA was telling me that since it's not mentioned in the record of decision that it was okay, our consultant is telling us it's not okay. So in the rare case, the EPA is actually less stringent than our consultant. So, but that was just in a meeting off the cuff without a document in front of them. So that's why we're having a follow-up meeting. So I don't know the answer based on contaminated soils, but and there's a geotechnical issue too. Those soils that were put in and they weren't compacted. They were just undocumented fill. And the nature of the contaminated soils is their topsoil. So it's usually clays and silt, they're fine, so there's no structural qualities with them. So to build on top of it, you would either have to blend it with some structural material like gravel or something, or you would have to drive piles until you hit a suitable base to base it off of. That works for structures, but parking lots and asphalt are a little bit more difficult because you can't lift up the whole parking lot or asphalt. So I think we need more information on a geotechnical report to know if they can or cannot build on it.
Have
And
they
then I need
done
more information.
geotechnical?
And then even with that, there would be the issue of disturbing contaminated soil
That's-
to do
So then
that.
you'd have to go through the remediation process. And our code and ordinances for the contaminated soils, it's much like our hillside overlay. It doesn't restrict development, it just gives you a pathway for development, and you have to clean it up and follow certain regulations and restrictions.
Have we
if I
seen
can
any
just-
structural or soil reports from this lot or from?
I haven't seen anything for.
So if I can just make a recommendation based on the complexities of this conversation.
It needs to
It
wait.
seems like this is something that definitely needs to be continued until a future date, because there's just so many questions for all of us about what, I don't think we can adequately address what the residents' concerns are based on the amount of information that we have right now, and can't necessarily put any expectations on the developer for the property, and that may be at odds with what the conditions of the property are anyway, so.
But devil's advocate, Jermaine Marine is in their, they're on the clock right now on that
This-
property.
I mean, this is part of their due diligence.
And that's what I'm saying. I still think there's a way we can put in the MDA that their due diligence has to be done without saying, let's hold off this whole thing. I mean, let's put in the MDA some language that says it has to be, because again, I don't know, to his point, I mean, I don't agree with Bruce a lot, but again, disturbing it.
I totally agree.
Disturbing it may actually be more unsafe. like I said, I wish it would come down to, I wish it would, but disturbing it may be worse. And I don't want to make that requirement that it's going to put risk to the residents if,
But then again, there's an issue of you may not be able to build on it if you don't move it, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So there's some.
We need all those
There's
answers
some
really
processes
before
that
we
need to be
could
worked
craft.
through. And I'm not necessarily saying that we can't come up with some kind of language to accommodate, but that's a lot of if-thens all the way through, you know, that's a whole bunch of them.
I'm not an attorney, but I pretend to be one sometimes. Ask the two that are in the room. I don't know how you would craft something that's general enough that takes care of both sides of that.
Larry, what's your comment on this?
So we have consulted an engineer, a soils engineer, and they have said it would be more difficult or challenging or dangerous or risky to move it than to not move it. I mean, either it's safe the way it's been there for years, and it is right now, or it's not.
Yeah, but
It's
is it
been capped.
buildable?
Pardon me?
But is it buildable?
Well, you've got two issues. One is contamination, and that's why we're saying we will comply with all laws that have to do with this. Local, federal. There are laws, Steve, that would dictate what we have to do.
Got it.
We don't have to decide tonight. We can rely on the laws because they're already in place. That's one issue, and we're happy to do that. The second issue is structural, and we would have to get a geotech done, and we would have to come in. That would be an engineering call, like any building on any site.
Any other
And we
property
would
has the same
comply with that as well. Let's move forward. Let's follow the law, and we'll follow wherever that goes.
Todd,
Those are the two issues, and there are already laws in place for both.
Todd, what's your take on it?
Yeah, a lot of the discussion seems to already be a part of the process as far as they're already required to follow federal, state, and local laws. We can add that in the MDA, but it doesn't do anything additional to them. And as far as geotechnical engineering would review that during their process too. So I don't know what language to add to mitigate any concerns, except for the height, which has been brought up, that if any structure is built on the berm, then you don't want these huge buildings backing the residents' homes. And that's part of the reason why we put in the, well, let me clarify. So the AMSD text amendment talks about height for vehicle storage. It doesn't talk about height for anything else. And Bruce is accurate in the sense that in the C2 zone, if they apply for something that's permitted or conditional, they can do that. They still have to comply with the local, federal, and state,
And the geotech.
and the geotech. So he is accurate that they have a right as a matter of law to do what they're, anything under the C2 zone. So we're hoping with the AMSD text amendment that the vehicle storage, which I believe is the plan, that those have a height restriction. And we have, if it's within 15 feet, it can't be over 15 feet. If it's further than 15 feet, then the applicant's proposing that to be 30 feet. And so that way, there is some benefit for that text amendment to go through, but that text amendment doesn't apply to this property if the MDA isn't approved.
But then again, where does that measure point come from, right? And then it'd come from the site plan or well, but if it's the plot plan from the subdivision, if it's the zero back a curb or whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you might be 15 feet on the berm, and then you're only 10 feet above, so you can only have a 10-foot building, right?
It'd just be measured from wherever that grade that their engineer designs it at. So they'll be looking at grades for drainage and grades to get the roads in for slope and things like that, so.
Yeah.
Trying to imagine picking a boat up with 15-foot berm to park it up in a garage.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make it clear, I completely agree with Todd's analysis.
Okay. And I think I'm okay on that too. Again, it's hard, but I think.
Okay on what? I mean,
Todd's analysis.
Todd's
Well, yeah,
analysis,
I agree
it's
with-
just,
that's what-
I don't think we need to wait, is my point. I think it's going to follow the legal process. I mean, if we wait, all we're going to do, we're going to get the analysis back. We're going to say, accept that analysis. Where all we're saying now is, go ahead and move forward now, you're going to have to accept the analysis once it's done. There's just the
depends on
timing
what
of that
you mean by
analysis.
analysis. So to me, I mean, I'm at this same point I was when we started the conversation. the law, rules and regulations are what they are, especially for contaminated soil. You know, if anything's disturbed, even to build something there, they have to go through that process, remediate, et cetera. So all of that is law. There's nothing that we could do that really changes that. To me, the ultimate question is whatever is built there is, if I'm a homeowner right next to it, what does that look like, right? Do I have, if and there's two ifs, the geotech and the subdivision review, where is that baseline, right? And how high do they get to go from there on my back fence? Right, so I think that's still a legitimate concern that we can address in an MDA, but what's our starting point there? I don't know that.
Is that something we can add to the MDA, the street grade, or reference that, or how's that?
Well, I think that's in there, right?
No.
Yeah, before I answer that, these are typical issues that we come across in the subdivision review process for lots of different areas that we always work through with developers. That being said, it would be probably a good idea between us and the applicant to figure out what those issues are beforehand. So that saves us any potential arguments down the road.
We have the same issue on the garden plots piece. C2 zone, 45-foot height restriction up against residential homes.
But there's no berm.
Well, we're modulating that with a 30-foot height restriction.
they're
The
saying.
berm
They're
back there is 12 feet. 12 feet.
Between 10 and 14.
We've measured it. We measured it at 12. 12 plus 30 is 42. That's 3 feet lower than it would be if you took off the berm, kept the height at 45 feet, which is what we have on
So he's creating
garden
that,
plots.
so they're creating that in the MDA by saying 30 foot's the cap. If it's 12 foot, it matches a C2 zone max of 40. It's less than the 45 foot. It still has the setback.
So if you,
It's not the same, yeah.
so if you look at garden plots, we have a 45-foot ability in the C2 zone right now in garden plots, with neighbors right behind. That's what can happen. The hotel is 60 feet, and that's going in the garden plots next to residential.
Yeah, but what's the setback and what's the?
Are there setbacks in the MDA as far as to get to that height?
There's no special setbacks. Other AMSD there are, but the C2, they just follow the
Against
C2.
incompatible, I think you have a 20-foot.
These are not single.
20-foot
It's not the
setback.
same.
Right,
These are.
right.
That's a consideration.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think the intent is to have some setbacks to where it's a certain height. They have to get a certain distance away before they hit that 30 foot.
Or even the
And
45 is
especially
a
where
certain,
we're
on the
bypassing a
C2 right now.
process where the residents can be involved in that with the.
But okay, we'll just disagree that we're bypassing processes. We've had the process. We've had more processes.
The
than-
10 to 14-foot difference in elevation, I measured from the property line of the homes that are along
back
the
fence.
north side and the top of the berm, just perpendicular from that line. So it was 14 feet at the highest, kind of just a little bit left of where the C's shown, and then it dropped down to about 10 on the far east end.
We've all seen those pictures of the water truck on top of the berm.
Yeah.
Right? And it's pretty impressive of what that would look like out my backyard. And if I was that neighbor, it would not be, I would be in the audience as well.
Okay.
Here's the challenge. I think that as stated by Bruce and agreed with our city attorney, they have certain land entitlement rights because of the zoning on it, to allow them to build certain structures there's certain things that are just permitted and even certain things that are conditional. And those structures could potentially be pretty tall. They are willing to voluntarily provide a height limit. They're also willing, based on the fact that they might be storage, there's additional height restrictions based on the text of the AMSD. Although I fully recognize the concerns of having these really large buildings right behind your house like that. I mean,
It could happen tomorrow.
yeah, it could happen tomorrow, much worse than what we're talking about with these constraints. That still being said, I don't really know how high even a 20-foot storage unit on a berm that might be 12, it might only be 6, they may have to go down to below that to meet the grade of the development. You know what I mean? I don't really know. If they're on top of the berm, that's not going to be pleasant, but I think it's better than what it could be. If they have to go below the berm, I think you're starting to get something that would be actually pretty accommodating. So I think that trying to guess what the impact is going to be, I don't know. Either way, I think there's something that's going to be built behind these houses that isn't ideal for them. And I think that if we can we're able to find some concession to reduce the maximum height there through the text amendments and through a voluntary agreement on here, I think we're doing all right. It doesn't mean that we have to, we can't have a further discussion about what the distance is from the fence before you can go to a certain height. I mean, I think that's possible, but I don't think that what they're suggesting is unreasonable or unlawful or abusive necessarily. I wish there was something we could do to make it easier on the residents there that isn't taking away the landowner's rights to develop it according to the zoning. You know what I mean? And those two things are in conflict with each other. It's a challenge.
Okay, well, let's go back. Let's check some of these ones. Let's check some off the box tonight. I think we're all exhausted. We've been at this for a while. Can we move forward with a vote on the text change?
11.2.
11.2. Any concerns with moving forward with that right now? From staff or council, any concern with moving forward with a vote on this?
I would just say, if you're going to do that, you need to make sure you include the changes that were discussed.
Yeah, I personally understand exactly what you're saying, and I have no problem with the discussed text changes and stuff. The frustration that I always have is that it's messy. It's like, it was messy for Bruce to go through it with us here. And so for our public to understand it sure would be nice to put out a document that says, here's the new ordinance that we're going to pass. It's just messy when we do it that way. I understand the intent and the desire, and I have no objection to moving forward on the approval of that. It's just, that's my only concern, is just it gets so messy for a public to try and decipher what we just did. Anyway, but that's just stated.
I think that's a fair
There's
point.
A lot of changes happening on the fly, a lot of things being discussed, and ensuring that those are all captured and codified appropriately and stuff like that. I understand the reluctance, and while I respect Bruce and Todd immensely and their abilities to review all of these comments and codify that stuff, we're voting on something that isn't concrete. It's a little squishy. And I think maybe, I don't want to delay things or cause obstructions, but if there's a possibility to settle all this and come back in our next meeting and just go bam, 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 and it's done, that might be a lot easier than trying to say, with every possible text amendment that we said, and I just don't know. I mean, I don't want to leave them hanging if there's something we can get done, but I agree with Sherry. It's kind of sloppy, I would say.
Yeah.
You might be surprised to hear me say this, but on just the zone text change, I mean, a lot of what we went through was, I mean, I think a lot of the messy stuff was MDAs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just the text change, at least for me, the majority of it was cleaning up language on landscaping requirements and things.
And it was well organized.
Substantial. Yeah.
In the zone. For me, and it's just me, the meat of it is the 4 uses and the table that we talked about. I could go either way. I mean,
I think that's where
I don't know that there's been any huge
I think the
rush,
text
but-
change, we're all, like, there was no disagreement, there was changes, but I would love to move forward with the text change, AMSD. There were not very many changes to the AMSD MDA. There weren't very many changes. That's just signage, that's just basic.
Signage and the landscape
Signage and the
thing and the-
landscape thing. I think that could be,
And honestly, for me, the only reason I'd say I hate to say it this way, but I want to check that one off because I think it confuses the others.
The text change.
To me, the zone is the core of what matters. They
Yeah,
can move
that's
forward
true.
with all of this tomorrow with the current zoning that they have, right? It's the Crescent piece that would need either a zone change to Auto Mall or the MDA, the rest of it,
Correct.
right? It's just the text change that they need. It's the MDA stuff that makes it all messy, that just really isn't needed, that we can take a lot more time on. So if there's users, if there's somebody's bought property there, say, and wants to start moving on plans and know what it is,
that's
then,
I would say,
then they have that zone.
I'd say, Jared, you make very good points. Thank you for clarifying that. I think the Crescent discussion is messy. And I think the rest of it, though, we got through pretty cleanly. It was a lot, but we got through it. I think it's pretty simple, the agreements, and I would agree we could move forward on a lot of those.
Hey, Mayor, I'll make a motion.
okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2022-40, amending Harriman City Code Section 1031 to modify permitted land use, architectural, landscaping, lighting, signage, and related land development standards for the Automall Special District with the changes and corrections we made in tonight's meeting with Todd and the applicant's attorney to clarify language and verbiage on cleaning up the document.
If you can put it at the approval of the city manager, city attorney, and the mayor.
And with the approval of those changes by the city manager, city attorney, and mayor.
Nice. I'll
Motion
second.
by Teddy, second by Sherry. Jared,
Yes.
Teddy,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes, that motion carries. 11.3 then, this is the MDA on the Auto Mall. Look for a motion on this one then. If I understood right, we're okay moving forward with this one as well, correct? Todd, you comfortable with this one too?
The MDA?
The MDA
Yeah,
on the
there-
Auto Mall.
Yeah, there's,
Okay, I'll look for a motion on 11.3.
Motion to approve ordinance number 2022-41, adopting a master development agreement for the Auto Mall development comprising of 50.38 acres of property located at 4874 West, 126 South, with all of the changes and amendments that we discussed to be signed off by the city manager, city attorney, and mayor.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Jared. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries. Look for a motion to continue then, 11.4, correct? We're all on the same page? That's north of Miller, right? That's north of Miller. We're okay with that, right?
We're continuing or tabling it?
Well, I don't know, all these, because they've taken off all the trigger stuff, right? Like there's nothing.
It's just AMSD.
It's very simpler. All we did was change added those 7 uses. That's it, right? I mean,
None of that
So-
matters.
or 8 uses, right?
So my understanding
like
from the applicant is he said,
table-
let's just table it. They'll bring it back at a future. So right now, the AMSD text will apply up there,
Okay.
but the AMSD MDA does not.
Right, but
Right.
if tomorrow an auto dealer wanted to go on North Miller Crossing.
They could.
They-
their
they would
zone,
have the
can go
zoning to
there
do
and-
so.
And get
Yes.
going.
All right.
Doesn't prohibit any auto mall
Yeah,
stuff to
so
go
what we're
in
saying
right now
for these 3, what we're looking for some help for us is we have in red on here an action, right? Do we want to approve or deny, or do we want to continue? What action do we need to take to table
Table
these indefinitely?
So
planning
tabling
commission
is
would
actually a
continue
motion. If you table
Continue
it,
it
then
without date?
you're supposed to actually then make a motion to take it from the table. So you can do that. That's pure Robert's rules. We're starting to get into some parliamentary
That's
stuff.
why I'm looking at the recorder. I don't.
Continue.
If you just continue it to some future date, undesignated, that
Without date,
that
can you
also-
say, so continue
yeah,
without
without-
date?
Yeah, that works too.
Mr. Mayor, I hate to cut in while you're making a motion. I apologize if I'm out of order, but technically, if you continue it to a date certain, then you don't have to renotice. And I'm sure
Correct.
Todd will say the same thing. If you continue it to an uncertain date, then you have to renotice.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
So
Is there a
the
date
water
you
rights-
have in mind then?
We would
there's-
want to.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
And-
there's
So let's
no,
do 2 weeks.
Well,
Does
this
this-
is north of Miller Crossing, Bruce.
So this was the one they were
No, I
willing to,
understand.
to table.
If it's on our agenda, it's publicly noticed anyway, right? Like it's.
Yeah,
True.
my
yeah,
point
there's
is.
no
if we
public
do it for-
hearing.
No public.
In this one, we did.
Okay,
want
got
to
it.
bring back at a date.
If we
There's
do
no
it for 2
noticing
weeks, then we can always postpone it later.
So does it matter then? Am I hearing, does it matter?
There's no noticing requirement.
So just without date then, because we don't have to notice anything. Are we okay with that then?
No, we would need to renotice it when we bring it off of the table. If
Right.
it's done indefinitely, you don't have to do any additional noticing if you have it to a certain date, whether it's 2 weeks from now or a month from now or.
A year from now.
So that way, really what the purpose of it is any public that is interested in it and are here, they know when it's going to be back.
Is that an expense of the city? Is that an expense that the city takes on to notice?
Let me just continue it till next week, to our next meeting.
3 months.
Up to 3 months? Is that, I mean, so if we notice it,
Well, we just need a certain date.
So
If we
second
table
meeting
it,
in
but if we
January?
continue it, we don't need one, right?
I think they're kind of the
Same
so-
thing.
Yeah, if we table it to a date certain, then we don't need to re-notice it. If it's a table it indefinitely, then we do,
When we bring it back.
when we bring it back.
So,
but if the onus is on us to renotice,
and I think with all this, the applicant's instruments, why don't we pick the 25th of January, 2023? Just continue it to that date. There'll be some opportunities if we need to continue it further, that give them time to perform. And actually, I think one of the
that kind of
dealers
puts a
wants to
deadline
be.
on it too.
Well, it allows it to come back. We'll put it on the tickler so we know it's still there. I don't think that keeps them from asking it to come forward earlier, if that
right.
comes up, and we can always just push it off at that point again.
Okay. So
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
January 25, 2023.
January 25. Okay. I'll look for that motion then.
Motion to continue item 11.4 to January 25th, 2023.
Motion by Jared, second by Teddy. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. That motion carries. Crescent parcel, oh boy. Can we jump to 11.6? Are we okay to jump? Vote on 11.6?
She looks.
Okay.
I look to the attorney, but I think you could take them out of order if you wanted to.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to get some
You're
stuff.
the chair, you can do whatever.
Well, I'm
you
just
want.
saying, I would like to jump ahead to 11.6. Because we all said we're okay with that one too. It's Crescent that we need to come back to and decide how we're going to do this. So I would like to look for a motion on 11.6. Bueller?
Thinking. I don't think there was anything of
Nature.
substantive concern or discussion
We haven't
around
been,
that at
we
all.
haven't been concerned about that at all.
30 foot, and that's what they recommended.
Yeah, we
That's in the,
It's in the AMS.
discussed the land use table and prohibited uses, and it's all,
I mean, this one's a no-brainer. We had no issues about this. So let's,
yeah, I would agree.
somebody please vote.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll motion to approve ordinance number 2022-44, adopting a master development agreement for the Auto Mall garden plots developing comprising of 8.38 acres of property located at 5047 West 12560 South, with the approved language that will be ratified and approved by our city manager and mayor and council. Attorney, sorry.
Motion by Teddy?
Includes the tables and everything. I'm sorry, can we have discussion?
Yes.
Yes, that includes the
Yeah, that
tables we
includes the
discussed
tables.
tonight and the permitted and non-permitted uses.
Okay. I thought that did.
And that's, because that happened in a work session, let's just quantify that here.
Yeah, that's, okay, thank you.
Is that part of the motion? Discussed in the work session. Yeah, as discussed in the work session.
Are you satisfied
Which
with
is,
that motion?
which is in the prohibited uses, well, the conditional use to add
Run through those?
what was it? It wasn't car wash, it was I have it written down.
Car wash was already
Car wash is
conditioned.
Car wash is already, outdoor recreation as a conditional use.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I was suggesting that for the crescent piece, not necessarily the garden.
Okay, I thought it was for both.
Yeah, it is, that we add one for that as well.
I think it's probably applicable for both.
Yep.
Plus all the extra church ones.
all
and
the-
all the
yes.
churches
All that
and the
stuff, and the
schools,
two
all
extra
all the
schools
extra
that we
stuff
talked
on the
about,
top. Yeah.
Yep. The
You want me
boarding
to-
school and,
The longest motion ever.
Okay, modify your motion.
Jackie, you got that? I'll modify it. I'll
Amended and
reread.
modified that motion 9 times now. yeah.
He's good.
This is a challenging way to make motions after all the debate and discussion and modifications and amendments that we
After 5
discussed.
hours of discussion.
Yeah,
You want me to reread that, Jackie?
it's challenging.
Yes, please, all right. Yeah.
Also, sorry.
Go ahead.
Don't want to convolute it, but with the conditional uses that will be reviewed by staff, we had this discussion in the work meeting regarding that, and maybe Michael can speak to this a little bit better, as far as if there's any issues, that it would go to planning commission and it's appealable by.
Process.
Yeah, if we can also talk about that, because that's not in the packet. That was all discussions in the work meeting.
Okay, Teddy, add to the motion,
Conditional use process, right?
adding the conditional use
I
process.
mean, my assumption was that was going to be included in all these MDAs.
Well, this is
except
we don't have conditional uses.
This is the
in-
first one.
Yeah, we specifically
It's
excluded
conditional
it
use,
on the
this one.
AMSD section, so.
All right.
You're going to amend your motion.
I'll amend my motion.
Good luck.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2022-44, adopting the master development agreement for the Autumn Mall Garden Plots development comprising of 8.38 acres of property located at 5047 West, 12560 South, with the changes that we had in this meeting, as well as the conditional use table and permitted use table we talked about in the work meeting. Any conditional use will follow the conditional use process that we have in place for that through staff.
yeah, it'll be an administrative review process that will be subject to an appeal. Yeah.
It'll follow the administrative use process, subject to appeal, and will be brought forth to the council or planning commission.
Yeah. We should also, you wanted to include a noticing requirement though, right?
Yep.
Including a public notice.
It's
Yeah.
part of that process though, right?
Right.
Already?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
It would be,
way I
it
have
would be additional, because conditional uses we typically don't notice. We put it on our meetings, but we actually don't mail out a notice. So in this case, it should be an extra step.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through that conditional use process, it'll also have a noticing requirement.
Yep.
All these changes will be affirmed by our city manager, our city attorney, and our city mayor.
Motion by Teddy.
I think I second that.
I'd second, but I don't know what I'd be.
Second by Steve.
It's a little cleaner.
Oh, my gosh. Jared,
Sure.
I tell my kid that's not a good answer.
Yes.
Thank you. Teddy,
Yes.
Teddy, Sherry,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
I'll vote yes, that motion carries.
Will you write
Okay.
that out for me next time, Jackie?
I can't wait to read the minutes for next meeting.
Yeah.
So now we gotta go back to 11.
Okay, now we got to go back to Crescent. What do we do? What do we do? My concern, I know the hesitation, I know there's concerns, but I also know we have a very good partner looking to, that is under, the countdown is on with the contract in place for a boat dealer.
But I don't think continuing this item stops his countdown. It just continues the due diligence on our part to allow Blake to have his meeting with the EPA to get some of the hard answers that we're waiting for. It's a couple of weeks, and his due diligence process can continue, assuming that the MDA will go forward. People do that in real estate all the
I guess I would
time.
ask this is what would we do differently based on the outcome of those meetings? I mean,
That's my,
it's either gonna, I think Larry said, they're either gonna have to remove it or they're not gonna have to remove it. They're gonna build on top of it, or they're gonna have to engineer something to build around it. Like, no matter what, none of those decisions we control. Those are all geotechnical stuff, EPA stuff, and, you know, environmental stuff. None of that is applicable to us. There are things that are applicable to us. We've just talked about the land use table, what's conditional, what's permitted, the administrative review process, the appeal process, the noticing. I think that if there's anything that's of a discussion point for us, maybe, is I would maybe like to understand the distance from the property line, height, just to clarify that, so you make sure.
Yeah, I totally agree on, that's kind of where I think a lot of us have always been on this contaminated soil. I mean, it's gonna be regulated the way it's regulated. How involved is it? To me, the only thing that I think is up, at least for me, it's kind of up in the air that we could do something with this on is the height. I would really like to know where the starting point is. What's that subdivision review process? It can't be too difficult to get a general idea. I mean, this is probably where it's gonna be, give or take.
I think it's going to come down to when they get their geotech done. If they have to do something to the base, they're going to take it down and build the base up the way they need to. So they're going to go through their process, and if the geotech requires it to go down a couple feet to put the base in, to build the asphalt and everything on top of, so you have a good structure.
So I guess I would say, if we're gonna have any kind of a height restriction, sorry, let me put it this way. If there's any kind of a height restriction that we would be concerned about, I think we would have to make it, or at least consider it in reference to the fence and a distance from the fence, or the property lines below.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in relative to some ambiguous thing nobody knows yet, right?
I would-
There's no way to put any.
And I recommend we require the same setbacks as a C2 zone, because that's what they're bringing in. Same setback requirements from sidewalk. I don't care where the.
Elevation
I don't care where the.
setbacks?
I don't-
But what about, I think there's
The way
property
it
setback
works-
from.
I don't understand.
So the way it works, yeah, right, the way it works, are you guys following me, planning? So basically, we're saying there's certain setbacks, the further you get away from the property line, the further, the height, the taller you can go. So all we're saying is follow those same height requirements with setbacks, whether or not the berm is there or not. Because then it's going to be the same, right, so if we're saying 45 feet, and there you can come up and kind of try to, what I'm saying is, we're still following C2 setbacks and guidelines. We're just saying, because if it's 30 feet from, I mean, I read through that. I think we're fine on 30 feet. I Googled while we were gone. Most bolt storage is, honestly, it said 12 to 15 feet. Again, and so I'm not saying, I think 30 feet you're going to be fine, is what I'm saying on, but.
Well, I was just going to make a suggestion. Look, we built a house in Orem, lived there for 30 years, but 2 years after we built, someone built behind us and the whole valley view was gone. I mean, I get the view thing. I understand it. If I was in the neighbor's position, I'd feel exactly the same way they feel. So that's why I was trying to limit it to what could happen, even if the berm came all the way down and we built to a C2 height. So I was trying to keep it, plus I think Jermaine wants height. I think they want some decent height in their storage units. So what I would suggest is, why don't we just say, we're going to follow EPA and local standards and laws on the contamination. We're going to follow the engineering requirements on the geotech. Those things may solve our issue and our disagreement and make everything moot anyway, but we'll follow them. However, if we do build on top of the berm, we don't exceed 30 from the top of the berm, so we're staying a couple, 3 feet under what it could be if we took the berm down and went 45 feet. Basically what the garden plots people are going to be dealing with anyway, people north of garden plots. But the distance from the fence, I think we can play with. So why don't we go whatever the C2 standard is for the height versus the distance from the fence.
That's what I'm
and add 10 feet to it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Add 10 feet to it. Make it 10 feet, make the angle better for the.
You're saying add 10 feet to the setback?
Add 10 feet to the setback.
From the back property line.
Whatever the C2 setback is, we go another 10 feet beyond that.
Mr. Mayor, can can I make a point here? We're using a slightly incorrect nomenclature. I hope Blake will agree with me. There's a difference between what are known as setbacks and what are known as step backs. And what you're referring to is a step back, not necessarily a setback. And I hope Blake and Todd can explain what I mean. But the way Larry explained it is take the step backs and move them 10 feet further back.
Right. Which is typically what we'd do if you were going higher for like a accessory structure. If you go above a certain height, you have to go another couple feet over. So, yeah, it's the same idea.
What he's saying.
I think another
Because the
thing to
setbacks in
identify
C2
is
already required for
the houses
45 feet,
along the
there's already a
north,
certain setback they have to
there's a
do.
backyard, because the setback applies to the backyard, and there's a different setback for the side yard. And so the houses along the east would be the side yard,
Correct.
and the houses along the
Yes.
north would be the backyard. So
I do too.
maybe just a point of clarification when you make it.
So for me, and I'm sure the residents, what are those numbers for C2?
So the C2, your front yard setback is 20 feet. Side yard adjacent to agricultural or residential zone, 15 feet plus 1 foot for every 1 foot of building height above 15 feet. So that's side yard. And then rear yard, if the building height is 35 feet or less, it's 20 feet. If the building height is more than 35 feet, it is 30 feet.
Let's assume it's more. Our 30 feet is more than 35 feet because we would add the berm height. We would be 35 feet plus 10 is 45 feet, right? That's kind of what I'm looking at. Worst case scenario, best case scenario for the neighbors.
40 feet, 30 feet plus 10 extra feet,
Thir-
right?
thir- Yes, I want to make it the best calculation case we can make it.
Which would mean
for
the building
neighbors.
is 40 feet away from their
If
fence.
that, yeah, given that
And
calculation.
honestly, I think that might even take the height of the berm out of play.
Out of it.
That's what I'm trying to do.
I don't think it even, I'm not sure that you're at 40 feet away from that. I'm not sure you're on top of the berm anymore. I think you're below the height of the berm.
That's what I'm hoping to accomplish here, is to
think that's a
say,
reasonable
we count, in essence, we count the berm height as the height of the building.
Yeah.
So the 30-foot building plus the berm of 12, we got 42 feet. We calculate based on the 42 feet, and we add 10 more feet of distance.
And that's what I'm trying to get at, because
That's-
now you're actually adding protections above what a C2 would go. Okay, I think we're okay there. One more thing, Larry, that would help our residents, I think, too. Are you willing to add more trees along that
Certainly,
back?
of course.
A spacing of what, 10
Yeah.
feet?
Yes, but let's not make the trees cut off more view than the building, right? So we have to be careful about the species. I think what they want is
Well,
a
I think-
screen, but not a lot of height. I'm
think
thinking,
the-
we can talk to them about
I
it.
think the language that was there before is what we're most comfortable with when the trees are mature, that they're touching.
They should
right?
touch, yeah. I
Yeah.
think that was what
Whatever species they are.
I think that's what,
So I would
that's
just look
what,
for a nod from the back, is that?
if we need to modify that with neighbor input, looking at species and placement, we're happy to do that. We want to make this work for them.
Look at us do this. We can do the hard things. Okay.
You watch too much Coco.
Larry, I think that's a really great solution. I appreciate you offering that up.
Great compromise, yeah.
Okay. Are we good for a motion on Crescent? With that language, then?
Who wrote that down?
Yeah.
I think so. I'll tackle it. Motion to approve ordinance number 2022-43, adopting a master development agreement for the Auto Mall Crescent parcel development, compromising of 15.5 acres of property located at 5452 West Herman Boulevard, with the modifications of adding 10 extra feet to the rear yard setback requirements that are in code, modifying the language for the landscaping in the back so that the mature trees would be touching, whatever species that is, and that the final approval of all the language to be reviewed by city manager, city attorney, and mayor.
I just do have one question about these. Are these rear yards or side yards on this portion of the Crescent?
It's referring to the side yard of the commercial property.
So So how will it impact these?
So it's rear, so it's going to be rear of
Rear of
that.
both?
Yeah, yes.
So
Both
this
those
is
are
all
rear?
rear?
Yes.
That side and that's all rear?
The side by,
Terramere?
Terramere.
That'd be a side yard.
That's considered side
I-
yard, which
If
is.
the berm gets removed, then that extra 10 feet would probably go away for the same angle, right? Is that what we're talking about? Talking about building on the berm, adding 10 feet in distance?
Are we adding 10 feet to the side setbacks too?
Yes.
Okay.
But
So
I'm
again,
just
we're
saying if
still-
the berm
But if the
goes
berm's
away,
removed, then that goes away?
then the
You just go back to
10-foot
C2.
extra bonus is
Goes away.
evaporated.
Okay. Thank you, Great point.
You got to do it again.
Good,
Yeah,
you
let
gotta
me-
do.
Should we start over?
Thank you, Sherry. I-
Two things real quick.
Hold on, Steve.
The conditional use language that was in the Crescent piece, we'll also need to talk about in this piece. The second thing is that
Right on
I just want to clarify that the height is for all uses on this parcel. Because the way we have it right now, if it's an AMSD use, then it follows the AMSD regulations. And I just want to make sure that if it's an AMSD use, like storage, then it's also following the same height restrictions that you've just discussed.
You get all that?
Meaning
He's
if it's an
referring to C2,
AMSD
yeah.
use, you have to follow the AMSD heights,
No,
Not-
the one we just discussed, the heights we just discussed.
not the AMSD. I thought the
The heights
AMSD
we-
use
the
were
heights-
more restrictive,
The heights we just discussed apply to the entire parcel.
regardless of the use.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough. So the conditional use table we discussed.
With the noticing process and all that jazz.
Oh, my gosh.
But if the berm
with-
goes away,
Table and
then the concession goes away.
Then the concession.
Yeah. Steve,
Administrative
Hold on.
review
Keep going, Tom.
process, 10 feet setback, unless berm is removed.
We still need to be specific, just like we were in the Crescent piece, or the garden plot piece, about the uses, churches, and the table.
I have the conditional
Okay,
use
you have
tables
all
we
that.
discussed with the conditional use for outdoor recreation and the prohibition on the other two school types that we discussed, right?
As well as the conditional use review by staff.
As the, yeah, have the administrative review process.
Yep.
Da-da-da. Setbacks, touching trees, conditional use table as we discussed, the administrative review process that we discussed, sign off by all the people, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Almost.
Okay, I think we got this.
Motion by Steve, I think.
Should I try this again? Shall I redo the motion?
Do I have a second?
Yes, okay, thank you. Thanks. How about I withdraw the former motion and I will make a new motion,
Again?
a new
I
substitute
second that
motion.
idea.
Okay.
What am I missing?
I
Are you
have to
doing
make
it
a
again?
substitute motion with all these other,
Did you put in the trees too?
I got it. I
Okay.
got it on here. We'll try this once again. Motion to approve ordinance number 2022-43, adopting a master development agreement for the Auto Mall Crescent parcel development, compromising of 15.5 acres of property located at 5452 West Harriman Boulevard with the following addendums of a modification to the setbacks on the property to be increased by 10 extra feet unless the berm is removed, then that 10 feet would no longer be required. That the trees along the back and side landscaping adjacent to the residential properties would be touching at maturity. That we modify the conditional use table as we discussed in our work meeting, including the conditional use for outdoor recreational uses and the elimination or the prohibition against the two other school types that we discussed. We want to make sure that we add the administrative review process with the public noticing, as we discussed in our other motions, and a sign off on the final language by the city manager, city attorney, and mayor. I think
And
that
that-
got it.
Did you say that AMSD, the height thing doesn't apply? We have to say that?
And the substitution of
Height.
the height
Height and setback be.
height and setback requirements of the AMSD zone to not apply.
Yeah.
I
Because
don't know how we
it's those
say
other
that.
ones. I don't even know.
Yeah,
what
that's
we're
good.
doing now.
I can
Are we
work
all
with that.
understanding what the intent is there?
Yeah. I get it.
Jackie's look says no.
And we have a backstop of sign off by the mayor, city attorney, and city manager to fix that. I'm not going to do that again.
Second.
Okay, a half of a second by Jared. Do I have another half of a second? Okay. Motion by Steve, second by Jared. Jared,
Yes.
Teddy,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. That motion carries.
Can I just make one real quick comment on my vote?
Yes.
Just for the residents here. I know there was a lot of concern about the contaminated soils, and there was comments made, well, we'll follow that. Well, there's no choice. They have to follow that. Those are guidelines restricted by the EPA. So I just think that it's important to note, because none of that is in the MDA specific language. It's because it's law. They have to follow those regulations. They have to make sure that that is not impacting unnecessarily the neighbors.
Sherry, can I ask something? Blake, maybe this is something that you could do at a later date. Once we do get the sign off from all of the interested parties regarding how the soil issues are going to be mitigated, could we have a report in the city council meeting that just says, here's what's going to happen, here's what some of the requirements are, this is how we're going to handle it safely, just so that the public can be aware of what's going to happen there?
Yeah, and I don't even think it's a bad idea, in addition to that, just to provide that to these neighbors right through there that are going to be impacted the most. If we could just send out a quick mailer that just says, here is the situation.
That's a good suggestion.
I know our communications group's putting together a website for the Auto Mall stuff. They're working on it. So maybe it's something we could just add to that, just the soil remediation plan, because it's a public document when it's created, so we can do that.
Perfect.
And I know we're trying to be late. I just thank you, everybody, for coming out. To me, this was how this process is supposed to work. Resident feedback, we try to take that into account, try to, negotiate, and we're not all going to get, none of us out here tonight got all we wanted. Let's just be honest, none of us got everything we wanted out of this tonight, but all of us got, in my opinion, all of us got something that I think is going to be a
Mr.
great
Mayor,
project for the
Mr. Mayor,
city.
if I may, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I was just about to say the exact same thing on behalf of the development team, and we really appreciate the good faith efforts tonight on behalf of everyone. I think we've reached a better conclusion than when we started a long time ago, and I just can't express enough how much I appreciate how the process has yielded that solution, and I mean it sincerely.
Thank you, Bruce. We appreciate you being on from wherever you are this week. So I never know. I can't keep track. So, okay. Well, I will look for a motion to.
No, you got
Yeah,
stuff to go.
finish these.
Item 12.
Oh my gosh.
Still got agenda.
That's why I keep you guys around. Future
Well,
agenda.
I'm leaving anyway.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Bruce.
Thanks, everybody.
Future meetings. I'm excited about this. City Council Strategic Planning Meeting, October 19th, 10 a.m. No decisions will be made during that meeting. That's just a strategic session where we're trying to create a vision for the city, where we're headed as a trust. I'm not doing. Next planning meeting, October 20th. Next city council meeting, October 26th. Again, there's a Veterans Memorial. Is that November? That's a ways out.
Yeah, that's your ways out. Yep.
Okay, look for a motion to, we got to go back to work meeting first and then to close.
So
So,
moved.
Second.
motion by Sherry, second by Steve, all in favor.
Aye.
Okay, we're going back to work, fast. Thank you, everybody, we appreciate it.